Repent. The Neon Crew podcast is extremely fucking nigh. Now, I went with a quote that's not said.
Oh.
But it's written out. Can you guess where it's from? Which movie and which scene?
Man. It's either the first or the last. I am going to go with the last.
It's the first movie.
Fudge.
It's towards the beginning of the film.
Fudge.
It's when Jim is walking through and he comes across the church. He goes upstairs and there's giant writing on the wall. And you're seeing it from the end of the sentence going up. So you're kind of like getting the reverse of it.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. The end is extremely fucking nigh. But then it like keeps going. It's like, oh, repent. The end is extremely fucking nigh.
Yeah.
It's a very striking image.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I usually pick stuff up like that.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I chose a quote that's not verbally spoken, like I said.
Yeah, you're testing me.
I am. Very much testing
Failed.
your knowledge. Welcome, everybody, to episode 98 of the Neon Crew podcast. My name is Kyle.
Mac.
I figured we just jump right into the movie discussions.
I think we have to.
I think we have to. There's not much else to talk about with movie news or anything, and we're talking about 3 films, so let's just kind of jump right into it. So, since these movies were kind of my recommendation, I was thinking that I would do days if you wanted to do weeks, and then I can come back in for years.
Love that.
That sounds all right to you. So we're talking 28 Days Later. This is a post-apocalyptic horror film directed by Danny Boyle. Is this the... so we'll be talking about 2 Danny Boyle movies.
Yes.
Is the only other one that we've discussed Steve Jobs? I think so.
Boyle films?
Yeah, because we haven't talked about Trainspotting. We haven't done
127 hours.
No. So I think yeah, this will be the second one, and Years will be the third one. Directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland, stars Cillian Murphy as a young man who wakes up from a coma in a hospital and discovers that London is pretty much abandoned. It's left in a state of disarray. There's debris and wreckage and a strange air about, and he's walking through. He can't find anybody until he comes across people who seem to be under some kind of illness or a sickness of sort, an infection, if you will. And soon Jim, who is played by Cillian Murphy, comes across 2 other survivors, Mark and Serena, and they have to help him navigate this new world of infected individuals. And the rule is that you can't get any blood in you, otherwise you will turn in 20 seconds with the rage virus. So that's the gist of 28 Days Later, pretty much. Spoiler alert for 28 Days Later.
Yep.
Now, I recommended these movies mostly in conjunction with the newest film coming out, 28 Years Later, which we'll talk about in roughly an hour and a half or so.
Fingers crossed.
Given how this podcast usually goes. Got to be realistic.
Yeah.
But I had watched this movie probably a month ago because I knew I was going to already see 28 Years Later. It was a film I was interested in seeing. And we can talk about the 28 Years trailer more specifically as we get into the discussion of that film.
Okay.
Because I think it's an important talking point. But this is a movie that was kind of hard to watch for a while. There was a lack of sort of physical media that you could get your hands on with this movie.
Really?
There was, I think, a licensing issue with the music specifically. So it wasn't on any streaming service for a very long time. And then 28 Years trailer drops. All of a sudden, there's a renewed interest in this franchise.
Yep.
And specifically this first movie. And so people are like, where can we get our hands on it? Where can we get our hands on it? So then I think it's Fox Searchlight, I want to say.
Yes.
Finally acquiesced and put it available for paid VOD. And also has an uptick in physical media sales as well. whether from like used video shops or, online sales or whatever. And finally able to watch this movie and talk about it in a way that seems pretty relevant. And I enjoyed this movie.
Oh, leading off strong.
Surprise, surprise. I enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
I personally, and I think we've talked about this before when discussing The Road, I am a really big fan of post-apocalyptic stories. It's one of my favorite genres and types of stories to explore in fiction.
Well, yeah.
And I think it can lead to a lot of really good, interesting, creative storytelling when you set it in a world like this.
Character decisions are not necessarily guided by the norms of society.
Right. And, I was a fan of Walking Dead. I was a fan of like that as like a zombie sort of thing. And from my understanding, this movie specifically is kind of has a heavy hand in revitalizing the zombie genre. Right.
Yes.
And I'm curious your relationship with this movie. I'm assuming you've seen this like way long ago before I did for the first time.
So the funny thing about this one is it came out 2002, I want to say. So this
came out the UK 2002, US 2003.
That's what I was thinking. I see. I just remember it was right on that edge of, are there? I think it had nudity in it. Maybe that's what my dad saw in the MPAA ratings.
Okay.
Right. This was like a movie where it's like you guys can't watch it, because his rule is anything but tits. So I did not see this when it first came out. I do remember at the time, I like how you talked about revitalizing. At the time, zombies were slow walking, undead, like muscles are barely functioning type deal. And my dad and my uncle were talking about watching this thing, and it was like a boys club talk. But I just remember them talking about like the zombies are sprinting. Like they're full, like you're not getting away from it. And that was like the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, these guys, it's not the undead anymore. These aren't your grandpa's zombies. They're coming at you. They're running like a 4.340, man. And that was kind of like the big thing about it. And that was like the really, for people that are going for the entertainment value. I think that really brought a lot of excitement and more of the fear because now it's not necessarily a slow cat and mouse game,
Yeah.
Stakes are incredibly high. I hadn't really seen, and honestly, even the full, I've seen so many components of this thing where I'd say I've seen the full movie. This was one that I don't know if I had watched it from start to end. So like the first time that I'll say in memory was on Friday. So it's one that I'm very familiar with the ending.
Yeah, and there's a lot to not just like the ending that we got, but also the endings that were filmed, pitched, ultimately.
Very odd.
Yeah. There's a lot to this movie specifically with the way it handles the conclusion.
Yes. So I'd seen, so I'll say before the ending of the climax, right? Mm-hmm. Before you get to the denouement. Yeah, that's about it. So I mean, like I my whole association with this film is fast friggin' zombies.
So I want to ask you, because there is an idea that people have when they talk about movies like this. There's a lot in the way of like vicarious relationships with like either the characters or like the environment when it comes to a post-apocalyptic zombie film or TV show.
Yeah.
So for example, when I watched Walking Dead a lot, I had the thought experiment of, could I survive in this world?
Oh, yeah.
Would I be able to navigate this? Would I have what it takes to survive in these situations? And with Walking Dead and like slow-moving zombies specifically, I think to myself, I would more than likely be dead. But if I somehow got lucky enough to get through it and come out the other side alive and not infected,
right,
then I could maybe like hold up somewhere for like a year, 2 years, like scavenge for food. If I'm like quiet and sneaky enough, I could be okay, right? Have to learn some life skills really quick. if I'm in this world of the fast moving zombies, I'm putting a gun to my head. Like, ain't no way I'm surviving through this.
Yeah.
And I'm not, like I said, I'm not fast enough to fucking outrun these things at all.
I don't know, dude. You're probably in the same shape Jim was.
So I'm gonna ask you, do you think about that when you watch stuff like this? It's like, could I make it through
Well, you
this?
have to, right?
Right.
Yeah, so when it comes to this, there's always the game that you're getting into, right? Like the Walking Dead's, the slow moving. It's like, all right, that's going to be more of your volume of work versus the quality of work.
Yeah.
That one I'd feel very comfortable surviving in. This one, it's funny because like you talk about the rules and kind of like the environment that you're in. There's two kind of interesting things with this. One, with the way that they're operating those things, like if I get spotted, it's probably over.
Yeah.
I do think if I had something sharp, I'd be able to hold up. I would probably be like in a Mark situation, unfortunately. But it was like. The funny thing about this is that it's, you talk about post-apocalyptic. It is and it isn't. The rest of the world's still functioning.
Yeah.
Now
we don't really
get a grain of salt.
Yeah,
in
and
this
we don't really get that as like a confirmation until later.
Right.
But they do plant that idea like right in this movie.
Yeah. Well, and like. So I didn't remember. I'm watching this. I don't remember, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right. Well, and they got airports and communication's been severed, and you're really uncertain, and there's like this air of like, isn't Great Britain an island? How are we like? How's that infection get out? Do they get on planes? So I won't lie, I wasn't thinking about surviving in this world. It was mostly like what's happening with the world outside this world, because we don't know. This is kind of like a limited storytelling in the sense that it's Jim's POV on what's happening with the events around him, but he's also on an island. So when it comes to like surviving in this one, I don't know. It's also interesting too because this thing is like if there's only if there's a shelf life, or only a capped limit on who can become infected, you also run into how many of these things are left. Like I kept getting into that. Like they have to be quiet, and then there's points where they're shouting. Like
yeah.
I don't really know what's triggering the zombies to get after them. There was a lot of questions that I just wasn't sure about, and I was trying to step away from all right, what's getting the zombies? What do they have to avoid, or what's going on versus kind of where they're at. And I don't know. Brendan Gleeson, made it a decent amount. So I was like, that's probably the right idea. I'd probably do what he did.
Yeah, right. I do enjoy, I mean, it's in the nature of the title of the film, but the fact that it is like a month after the initial outbreak, it does leave a lot of room for, still recognizable qualities in like humanity and how we respond to these sort of things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what people were thinking of at the time this movie came out was like, wow, this has a lot in common with like post 9/11 imagery of like the streets of New York and the abandoned nature of it and the debris everywhere. And a lot of people thought, oh, this movie is a response to like post 9/11 sentiment when it was filmed before 9/11 happened.
Yes.
And Danny Boyle, I think, was in an interview talking about how I wouldn't have been able to film parts of this movie in London in the streets in the way that I did if 9/11 had taken place.
Yes.
Like they just wouldn't have let me do it.
Yeah.
And I want to say that the only sort of like post 9/11 influence that this movie has included in it is the scene in which Jim's walking through and he comes across the wall of like the missing persons flyers.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it and it's very striking, kind of like the final sort of like indication that like something has gone like really wrong, because he's walking through, and the way that those shots are framed I just love.
Oh yeah,
like
it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, and like him walking through these abandoned streets, which I guess like when they were filming they would do it like 20 minutes at a time, where they'd like stop traffic, set everything up, shoot like I don't know, like 10 seconds of Killian walking through the streets, and then just like cut and move on to like the next area he had to go to. which is really cool, kind of like guerrilla filmmaking technique. But it also adds that sense of realism. It's like, okay, there's like no sets going on. There's no like.
Well, you see Big Ben in the background of one of the shots. So he's walking over the bridge, and it's really striking. When you're able to isolate an area like that, especially something that's populated, I would assume, as London.
And then he finally comes across the wall of missing people.
Yes.
And
that's when it really hits you that because it's almost like a fever dream that he's going through. It's very
liminal.
And the information that we receive, which is another thing when you talk about the revitalization of the zombie films, is that it was always the undead, whereas this one postulates that it's a virus that's taken over. And it's it always reminds me of the Matrix when Agent whatever talks about the human beings as being a virus taking over the planet, and gives you the sense that this is what would happen if a virus outbreak happened and a virus was able to control a human, like a human vessel, essentially. So you really don't know, because like it kind of just happens. It's real quick. There's a couple of eye changes, I think, in the intro. All of a sudden it's just on Jim waking up in the hospital, empty hospital, and it's, all right, was he one of the guys? Where are we at? What's going on? And he's just walking through, and there's this like really sense of loneliness, abandonment, and isolation. And once he hits that wall, it really brings everyone else into the picture of society, that there's something wrong happening.
Yeah, and it's the period before he finds out that there's infected people. Like, for all he knows, that there could have just been like a mass exodus or like something happening to make people disappear in London, and he's just like, probably still thinks he's dreaming. I mean, there's a scene later in which like he still thinks he's in a nightmare of some kind. He's just trying to wake himself up.
I think that's where I drift to, is like, all right, you wake up in an empty hospital bed and you're walking the streets alone.
Right.
How are you handling that situation?
Yeah. I'm trying to find, so there's just so many like good haunted qualities about this movie that I love. One of them that stands out to me is the note that his parents leave him when he like finds them in the bedroom. Oh. And I'm kind of like jumping forward a little bit, but...
Well, we don't have to go through this thing linearly. Usually we just talk about it.
Right, exactly.
You're good.
There's
no structure.
We're taking shots at it. Much like Aaron Taylor Johnson takes shots with his bow and arrow. I'm tying it. I'm so tired. Just bear with me, guys. I'll wake up soon. Just like Jim woke up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. I made up for it. But the note that his parents leave him is like maybe one of the most emotionally effective pieces of writing I've seen in a movie in a while, where it reads, "With endless love, we left you sleeping. Now we're sleeping with you.
Yeah.
Don't wake up."
Yeah. It's
just so fucking it hurts.
Morbid,
beautiful, like kind of.
Yeah,
it's beautiful in that like his parents don't want him to suffer in a world that is currently the reality of the situation.
Emo's the only thing that kind of comes to my mind, but it's a dark beauty, if you will.
Right.
There's a lot of talk. I'm trying to think. There's been some other movies that we've probably watched recently where there's some very heartfelt notes along those lines of acceptance of death being a part of the journey.
Yeah.
And that's what that note struck me as, because like when he gets up there, it's like heartfelt, touching. Don't know. Hey, we don't want you to wake up, and in case you do, we hoped you didn't.
Right.
So
exactly. There's like the idea of putting something out of its misery, essentially. Like we don't.
Well, and this landscape. That's what everyone gets reduced to. I mean, essentially, we get down to the very bare elements of the human nature, right? And then it's that interesting, theory of, what would you do? How would you react? At what point? Like we're rebuilding society. The rules are no longer what govern us. We get to create our own rules.
Yeah.
And I mean, like Naomi Harris steps in, Serena, and all of a sudden this is the rules that we are now following in order to stay alive. Like if Darwinism to take effect and we're to evolve again or whatever, this is how we have to continue on. And like the whole film really it breaks down a lot of, I don't want to say society. It's not looking at problems with society. It's more so of
like
if
human nature. Yeah.
Yeah, if you were to strip society away, if we didn't have the social contract on, it gets reduced. What are we doing next?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, no, this movie, I think at the time, a lot of the stars in it, aside from I think Brendan Gleeson and Christopher Eccleston,
Yes,
were pretty unknown
they
at
were.
the time.
I think Boyle was trying to go that route, if I remember reading that correctly. He wanted to make it so you could see yourself in the situation.
Yeah.
Like you're not, if Brad Pitt's in there, you're watching Brad Pitt, right? Like what's Brad Pitt doing? Cillian Murphy at the time, no name, right? Nothing going on. You are watching him thinking, this is a person I could be sitting next to on the train if this broke out,
It is crazy that we are living in a post-Cillian Murphy Oscar era watching this movie. And yet you watch him play this character, and there is still that idea that, yeah, this is just a guy waking up in this world. And he's not boring. He doesn't play it in a way that's like boring or uninteresting.
No.
But there is just this level of like I could put myself in this situation and probably see myself making similar choices that he's making, or like behaving in the same sort of way.
There's he does have a moral code while also maintaining a survivalistic element. I think we see it in that scene with the teenage kid when he goes into the gas station and he has yet to kill anything or knowingly kill something, right?
Right.
Like where it is now making a choice, realizing some of his actions and what they could lead to. And you actually get to see that him run into conflict of everyone's still a person. And now all of a sudden he understands the gravity of what's happening, and now he has to make a choice. And just seeing him walk out of that, and it's like, all right, what as a person am I still holding on to?
Yeah.
Because everything that I've had as a moral compass is now kind of out the window, at least when it comes to these creatures or zombies, right? And I really like that scene where he's so defeated, and it's not necessarily looking like it's almost like I killed a person, but I didn't kill a person,
Yeah.
Like
something has fundamentally changed inside of you.
Yeah, and it's reckoning with that, right?
I feel like there's so many parallels between this as a screenplay, since it's written by Alex Garland, and Civil War.
Yeah.
Because there's a very kind of like similar sort of reverse of that arc in Civil War with Kirsten Dunst's character.
Okay.
Where there's this loss of humanity at the beginning because she's so jaded to what's gone on. She's a war photographer, so obviously like she's numb to a lot of the stuff that's happened, and as the movie progresses, her empathy starts to grow more and more in a way that becomes like a detriment to her job.
Right.
Whereas this is almost the opposite, in that Jim starts out obviously like very kind of vulnerable to the situation emotionally.
Yep.
Everything's still super fresh for him. He can't quite emotionally and a lot of times physically cope with what's going on.
Yeah.
But then as the movie progresses, he becomes more and more capable to the point of like we get the ending where he's just like murking all these guys and like doing these like guerrilla tactics in order to save Serena and Hannah from this horrible fate.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's a lot about that. There's a lot about the like kind of like road trip aspects of like this movie being a parallel to like a lot of what Alex Garland has written in the past. And I really like this screenplay. I think it's a very tight, simple, grounded screenplay that accentuates the personal feelings that we have for these characters, something that I think we lose in the next movie, which we can discuss as we get into 28 Weeks Later.
Yeah, there's two different vibes, I definitely think. And it's to carry it over into the next, and we won't get into 28 weeks right now, but I definitely feel like there's two different themes going on and messages being sent. Where with this one, yes, I mean, I agree 100%. I really like this, and I really feel like this was kind of the launching point for a lot of these. I am starting to drift more into these horror movies being more as anecdotes for other problems in society or things that we're experiencing.
Yes.
And I think this was one of the first ones to do that. And it's funny because like everyone talks about, this being a zombie film and how much they like it. And I'm like, the zombies are like on screen for 20 minutes.
Right.
You know, it's very funny that he can take a message, write the scene, even the ending of it. It's not dealing with a zombie horde. It's dealing with a group of, men that are freaking cock thirsty. I don't know what you call them, but like in the horrors of that, and where you get to a point where society's been reduced. What's the ultimate goal here?
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to say about that specifically as like the theme of a lot of these like movies and properties, where it's like, oh, we have the zombies to deal with, but we learn that humanity is like the worst type of thing when it comes to these scenarios.
In different regards.
Yeah,
because I do think 28 Weeks touches on it.
Yes. And I have a lot to say about that specifically in relation to like a lot of real world parallels that I saw while I was watching it.
Right.
But I do think that this movie does it in a way that is like, it's smart in that they're not like roving bandits like in Mad Max or anything.
No.
Or in like The Walking Dead, where it's like, oh, we came across like another group of like bad survivors that have like all these like shamrackled like weapons and like duct tape baseball bats.
We're
and
gonna
shit.
kill you to eat you, and then we're pillaging, and we're gonna use your bones to make weapons.
Right. No,
right?
this is a group of soldiers who have their own like kind of complicated structure.
Yes.
Who have their own sort of like philosophy of like why they're doing what they're doing, and some of them don't even like fully agree to what they're doing.
Yes. Did you watch? So like, not to cut you off. Like,
No,
I was
you're
just
good.
Curious. Like with the soldiers, like they get in there. They got the captain. Whoever was
Christopher Eccleston.
Eccleston's playing the captain, right? And then he's got everyone's got a role. It's like this little society with him being almost like the president. Did you run into this thing where it's like, okay, there's nothing left. Like, you guys can do whatever you want, all of you. You don't have to take orders from him or listen to him. Like, obviously you have some sort of system set up, and all of you guys play a hand in making sure that for your survival. But why is the hierarchy still here? Did you question that at all?
I didn't question it because I feel like when people are put in situations and there is an authority figure that can lead the charge and make the decisions, I feel like more often than not, people will kind of like fall in that sort of line, even if there is no line to fall in anymore, ostensibly.
Yeah.
And you see it a lot in, other post-apocalyptic movies or like TV shows where it's like, yeah, we got this like big dick alpha male coming in and making things work because they prop themselves up and put themselves in charge.
Yeah.
And like everybody just kind of like
Falls
toes
in
the
line.
line and does what they want them to do. That being said, I do like that this movie includes the one soldier who like stands up for what's right and fights back against it, even if it results in his death.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, you do get the sense that like this is more or less like a reflection of humanity and how we treat each other through like violence and these sort of
Group
like
thing too. I mean, you're getting
interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
Because he has that speech at the dinner where he's talking about this isn't any different from before the virus took place.
Yeah.
What I saw out there was people killing people, and what I've seen before this is people killing people. It's all it makes no difference to me.
Whether it's people or zombies.
Right. And we have, and I don't want to talk on this too much, but like we do have in our real world, in our reality, these situations in which people take positions of power and they abuse it, and there's not really any real sort of like consequence for that sort of thing to play out. It's just like how the world works. And Danny Boyle's just kind of like taking that concept and I should say Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are taking that as a concept and just like distilling it in a way that works in this as a zombie
Everyone's going to have
movie.
your motivation for why we are going to work together and what we have to get, and they recognize that motivation is going to turn into women. And all right, now we have to,
because he's talking about how he saw one of his boys like putting a gun in his mouth, and he said that they're gonna die alone, that there's nothing left.
Yep.
Right. And you get a little bit of hint of this when Christopher Eccleston's showing Cillian Murphy the infected on the chain. And he's talking about, you know what I see when I look at him? He's never going to eat again. He's never going to love again. He's never going to watch a movie again.
Yeah, a little bit maybe of a parallel with.
And there's nothing left for him after this. Mm-hmm. And that sort of reflects the feeling that the other soldiers have of like, well, there's nothing left after this. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
If we make it through this.
Let's make a goal of some sort.
Right.
And it's going to be repopulate.
And their goal is awful. And they're drawing in people so that they can rape the women. And it's terrible.
Sounded like a bad idea. It's always a bad idea. I hate to get into like the literal sense. I've been called very literal recently. Love you, Jasmine. And it got into like, okay, we're repopulating. We are now one kid every year. It seems like a bad idea.
It just seemed like an excuse they were saying to
right.
Enact whatever it is they wanted to enact.
They were, I get that. It just is like we're going to justify our actions.
Right. I'm almost wondering if them like not revealing themselves until after Brendan Gleeson dies was them just kind of like waiting for one of the men to get killed off so that they can swoop in. And
it's an interesting, that is interesting because would it have made the scene any different had we known that they were there watching?
Right.
I took that scene as they kind of stumbled on.
Okay.
Like they are approaching, and it was kind of happenstance that the actions took place with him.
Right. Maybe they like saw their car pull up, and it took them that long to get to them.
Yeah. But it's also fun to think about in your viewpoint of, all right, like we see there's one more person to contend with. Right,
because I think there's a version of this movie in which Frank lives, but they like take him captive or something. Like the part of like one of the many alternate endings and like outcomes that this movie has.
Yeah, just can't get the ending right, man. Let's do a freeze frame.
Yeah, but I do like either of those as like a theory.
It's fun. I mean, it's another one of this is a very rewarding movie when you can put yourself in, and it's not a step-by-step guide on what to think, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot going on with the environment around you, and there isn't anything to say this is right or wrong, which is another that plays into the collapse of society, right? There's nothing governing us. Where are we at? And you could turn to religious viewpoints. You could look to structure. You could look to leadership, right? And there's nothing... I really like the road trip aspect of this thing where they're all banting about and they're just helping each other.
Yeah.
But it's all for survival, but there's nothing governing them on what they're going to take, what they're allowed to take, and it's a very fun kind of sandbox Play-Doh-y area that you're living in where it's you can put yourself in their shoes and make your own determinations, like a Goosebumps. Yeah. Remember that Goosebumps book where you could read and turn to page 94 for this, or turn to page 48 if you want to do
like
that.
A choose your own adventure sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's fun to kind of have those thoughts as you're going about. Now, obviously, we're still following the characters, but within the environment that they're in, you have time to think if you're going to be able to run and escape these things, or if you're going to take it out like Jonesy.
Yeah, I do enjoy like you said, the road trip aspect of it, and the sort of like hodgepodge little like family unit that they have together softens up Serena's character a little bit, and I like her sort of progression of going from this like hard stone edge like survivor killer if she has to type of lady who doesn't want any like personal feelings and relationships to someone who like not through like any like words or anything, but just like how we see it play out visually in the film. I'm making myself a little more like vulnerable and like
we're developing a bond,
open to like these people as like we're a unit now. We're surviving together. It's like a family.
Axing, your sister. And like you've got 3 seconds before you get your head lopped off.
You're not putting fucking blade marks through Mark.
Yeah.
That's why his name was Mark, because he was all marked up after she was done with him. You know what I mean?
Poor guy.
Yeah.
That is so unfortunate.
Yeah. I love the way that scene plays out. I saw it in his eyes.
I saw it. How do you know?
I do love that line where he's like, how did you know he was infected? And she's like, I didn't. He knew he was.
Yeah.
I could see it in his eyes.
It's a great... That gave me goosebumps just now.
Oh. I have that effect. Speaking of goosebumps, choose your own adventure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, choose your own adventure. 28 days later, 28 years later. What are we going to talk about?
I think that's a good segue into the performances of this.
Yeah,
I think Cillian Murphy's great.
Okay,
obviously. Naomi Harris, awesome. Brendan Gleeson, stellar.
Yeah, love him.
And Christopher Eccleston, like pretty fucking rock solid.
I
Does
don't
what he needs to do.
recognize him for. I don't know.
I guess he's a one of the Doctor Who's. Megan recognized him when he popped up. She recognized him before I did.
Yeah, everyone's talking about like, oh, it's Christopher Eccleston. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
I admittedly wouldn't have that much familiarity if Megan hadn't pointed out, like, oh yeah, he's in Doctor Who.
Yeah, like it's funny, like when you read up on trivia on this stuff and his name's brought up in every third piece, and it's like,
I mean, it's a fun name to say, Christopher Eccleston.
I guess. Yeah.
I like saying it.
Yeah, you've been saying it the whole episode too.
Puts my tongue in great places that I like around my teeth and mouth.
Yeah.
I'm setting all this up to say that there is one major problem that this movie has.
Whoa.
That I don't think we can ignore.
Okay.
Let me just pull it up here. Megan Burns as Hannah. I think her performance is distractingly bad as Brendan Gleeson's daughter.
Autistic kid? What do you got a problem with autistic kids?
I don't think she's supposed to be autistic.
Oh, here it is.
And
yeah.
This movie,
is that what you tell kids when they walk down the street?
This movie has a lot of importance placed on her relationship with Brendan Gleeson, like father-daughter unit, them kind of like letting these people in. There's like a point of vulnerability to them as a unit of like, okay, well, he's like an older man who's like a little bit out of shape, and like she's a young, vulnerable girl.
Yep.
Like, obviously, there's some trepidation to navigate when it comes to this environment. Add some tension and stakes of like, oh, is something going to happen to them at any moment? I think her acting and her delivery of dialogue is so stilted and unbelievable that anytime she spoke, it just immediately took me out of what I was watching. It was bad.
Okay.
It was just distractingly bad. And I'm guessing that you didn't have an issue with it. If
lukewarm. I didn't.
Not something popping up on your radar.
So sometimes, like when we get into these like alternate realities or events happening, it's so hard for me to rate a performance because at the same token, I don't think either of us would know how we'd act once we got into that environment. And I know that it's a pick a lane, but I looked at her as quiet, vulnerable, not gonna, like, my dad has told me to shut up the last 28 days. I can't talk. I am soaking all of this in. This is all very new, and my mind's still growing. So, like, all the older people have fully developed opinions on what they need to do, right? You have your philosophy on where things need to go. Cillian Murphy is very different from Naomi Harris, is very different from Brendan Gleeson. She's still formulating all of this stuff. So her actions are not to say she's still incurring some like learned behavior, but this environment is something that she has not internalized or thought about. So like, I don't hold. There's two performances because we got 28 years later, and that kid I thought did great. Right, but also
fully agree.
He is the focal point of that, and it is his story, right? Whereas this one, she is almost just part of the problem happening, and I don't know if it played more into the savagery of what the men were looking at. I will say I did have a little bit of a problem, like when she takes the drugs, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't know funny what we're trying to do here.
That's when it became more believable for me that she'd have stilted dialogue, because now I think, oh, she's under the influence of drugs, and that's why she's talking weird.
She really didn't like have a whole lot of lines, though. I don't know. I can't.
She didn't, but at the same time, the lines that she had, every single one of them felt like she was reading from a cue card for the first time. Like the scene in which they're on the balcony, and it is like a nice exchange of like Brendan Gleeson talking to Naomi Harris of like, these walls aren't as thick as you'd think they'd be, but you're right in that we do need you more than you need us.
Yeah.
And then she chimes in and says, but we all need each other. You need us just as much as we need you. And when we get together, we have to make sure that we watch each other's backs. And it's really kind of like way too drawn out, monotone. There's like nothing behind it whatsoever to me.
Everything that she did, I kind of took as trepidation. There is a sense so like I said, the whole time this is happening, it's like,
I took it as like she was bored.
Yeah, but there's like seriously, if you think about it, all right, we are on the top floor. We just let 2 strangers in, and we're gonna sleep next to them. We don't know anything about these people. We're being forthcoming and welcoming. They literally could wake up in their sleep and kill us both. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a certain line of dad trusts him. I don't know if I trust him, but like once again, like I try not to get totally involved with some of the side characters on some of this stuff because it's like God knows what role you're going for, what performance you're going for. So
I feel like it wouldn't be an issue for me if there were like 3 other characters they were with and like she was more in the background, but there's only the 4 of them. Mm-hmm. So it's hard not to have her stand out, at least to me.
Right. And you're throwing yourself on, everyone can probably sink their chops into kind of like where their characters' motives are. And with her, it's like, hey, your dad's surrounding you, and there's a zombie outbreak, and you're just living with him. Mm-hmm. You know, like figure out how scared you want to be versus confident you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a tough role. I didn't really pay too much attention. Like I said, I don't think she did fantastic. I'm not going to remember her role in this thing, but also it wasn't enough for me to be like, you know. Yeah.
It was enough
it's
for
fair.
me to go. Blah, blah,
yeah.
blah.
Fair enough.
Let's talk about the visuals of this movie, because I feel like we can't talk about this movie without talking about the quality and the camera work.
Oh yeah.
So this movie opens up and it's got all of this what looks like real world like footage of this violence happening all over the world, and it slowly like kind of pans away and you see this chimpanzee strapped up to this like set of monitors.
Yes.
And it's like taking in all this this violence. It's ultimately like I think what contributes to the rage virus. It's like all this like angry and hateful and awful stuff happening, recorded on these cameras that, you know, news footage, look like kind of like camcorder footage or whatever.
I thought it was odd, but yeah.
I feel like that kind of helps ease in people who view this movie not knowing, oh, this is going to look like it's filmed on a Game Boy Advance. And I think that it really does help kind of the groundedness of this movie, in that it feels like you're watching, at least in moments, something that's happening in the past, or like something that's happening in the real world that's being filmed on this shitty little camcorder.
Yeah.
So I have it pulled up here. They used Canon XL1 digital video cameras.
It's like one of the first films filmed digitally.
Yeah, because at this point, most films are made on film.
Yep.
But because Danny Boyle wanted to prioritize the movement of the camera and the flexibility of the camera and what he wanted to do with it as far as like the framework,
yeah,
he wasn't too concerned about like the overall quality of the picture itself. So you watch this movie, you throw it on, you ask yourself, why does this look like I'm watching a YouTube video of someone at the zoo in like 480p?
Yep.
That's why.
Yeah.
And I think it does, one, add, whether on purpose or incidental, I think it adds a lot to the tone of the movie, in that it feels like you're like ground level watching footage, like found footage almost, of like this thing taking place and unfolding.
Yes.
And two, it does add to the dynamic nature of how Danny Boyle has filmed this movie, because the way it's edited and put together, a lot of like frenetic energy,
yes,
a lot of like POV shots,
yes,
a lot of like really kind of like cool cutting and like framework and just like things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. And
I like,
there's like not another movie like this, really.
No, it's got a very it's almost like you mentioned, I mean, it's almost like you're watching a memory.
Yeah.
And the way that it's shot is one, I mean, it does help out with the buildup of the rage virus and the freneticness and the chaos of it all, and giving you that sense of being in that reality. But also, I mean, some of it, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, if you're reliving a memory, those are what you're gonna feel going down memory lane, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me out at the beginning. There's a certain graininess around it. You know, there's like a filter on Snapchat that's kind of got something like this going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny that at the time, I'm curious if it really resonated with the audiences. Now, like, it's funny, like, looking back, this goes into the zeitgeist now, just because I feel like this is a film that you could throw on for generations to come, and it would hold up in that regard of this is it timestamps it, right? And with that timestamp, it almost adds more of the realism. And some approaches are either with shot on location or with the costume designs to get that feel. This one is almost built in with the technology. So to me, it felt unintentional. I mean, I feel like more so with the camera work, it was more accessible to get the shots that he needed with the filming and the camera style. Probably why he did 28 years later in the same regard. But yeah, it by the end of it, I was very much a fan.
Yeah. It grows on you.
I think it's something. I really think if you throw this on, for a 19-year-old kid now, I'd bet you they'd be taken out, and then all of a sudden it grows on you. You start getting more in, and I think that also helps out with being able to not necessarily lose your thoughts in this film, but being able to think about it in a light that you are in this world, which is fun.
I feel like this movie specifically will. I mean, I think it has aged well. I mean, it's 20 years after, the movie came out, more than that. I think this movie will have a sort of resonance with younger people watching it because they're used to a more kind of like analog way of viewing horror.
God, we all are now.
Like movies like Skinamarink, obviously like a very different movie that's going for something that's, obviously separate from this. I do think that there is this idea that like people are sick of movies looking a little too like kind of like polished
clean
and like
cut.
perfect and like centered all the time and like boring color palettes and like this sort of look that a lot of Netflix movies have where it's just like
very clean cut, put on design, squared edges.
Feels like it came off of a production line. Whereas these movies, the way that they're filmed and like the unique way that it's like all come together, I think a lot of younger people will kind of like have that a sort of appreciation for it because it's like, oh, this is nothing I've seen before.
I do think younger moviegoers.
Yes.
I think if you take an average movie watcher and place this on, they're taken out.
Right, like general audience member. Just like, I think you're right about
that. But that doesn't. I don't hold this movie. I don't hold it against this movie for that. I actually like that. If you had a movie class and were to throw this on, you'd probably have a lot of engaged people.
Yeah, I think so. I got a few notes that I can go through.
Sure.
That can serve as like jumping off points. Alex Garland was influenced by George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yawn.
I was about to ask if you've seen any of those movies.
George Romero's one? No, it's same thing, bits and pieces, dude. Like the zombie stuff was always like really cool. I think there was a drop-off point for, 40 years, Like you kind of had Night of the Living Dead, and then there was some of these elements that would come up to play, but I think it's so hard to film movies like that because the essence of the zombie horde is so hard to capture, right? And then, the Romero stuff started coming out, and he really took a different approach with it, on that survival element. But if I remember right, his are dealing with like malls and, different kind of place in limited settings.
And a lot of his movies specifically, I think, served as like kind of political commentary of like groupthink and like
I can see that,
just the way that we kind of like drone on through life. That's why they're like slow moving. That and like technical limitations, obviously.
No, is George? No, I might be mixing them up. Romero's is he the 60s, 70s, or is he?
I think so. Like 60s.
I want to say he came out. There was someone else Romero-esque that came out. What was the most recent one that Netflix did?
I'm not sure.
Interesting. I'm sitting there. I'm thinking of the newer, like the 2000s, kind of had a couple of these built in where they're very actiony. Because the Romero stuff, like Night of the Living Dead, is very much social commentary.
Right. Well, there's the Zack Snyder like remake Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, that's what they are. The Dawns of the.
Yeah. Oh! I know what you're thinking of.
Right.
The fucking it's got like Dave Bautista in it.
Yeah.
That's a Zack Snyder movie.
That's Zack Snyder.
Yeah. What the fuck is that movie called?
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I watched it once. I was like, all right. I saw that.
I gotta look it up now. Dave Bautista. Zombie movie.
Because I thought Romero was
Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead. You have the Dawn of the Dead, and that
Yes.
came out in the 2000s.
That came out 2004.
Right, and that's where they're at the mall,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken. But I thought there was another one too. And is that Romero that did Dawn of the Dead? Or am I
The original Dawn of the Dead. Like, because Zack Snyder's is technically a remake of a George Romero movie because it's got like the same name. I have very loose knowledge of this.
I'm and I don't mean it because, like I said, like the zombie stuff, I felt like was like you have the Night of the Living Dead, and then after that, I was kind of like I'm good.
There was a significant drought in the genre,
and then there's a couple of them. So 2004, Dawn of the Dead, Ving Rhames, and that is so that is Zack Snyder. I didn't know Zack Snyder did that one.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Boy, what
a lot of
to you,
people
dude?
consider it his best movie.
Has to be.
I haven't watched it personally, but it's what I read on the web.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's where I kind of felt like this was another, like you said, revitalized. So I don't know what happened, like 80s and 90s. I don't know how many zombie films came out that
Right.
pop culture.
So Danny Boyle liked the script and wanted to work with Garland again after adapting Garland's novel, The Beach. Have not seen Danny Boyle's The Beach.
Leonardo.
But yeah, I guess he just wanted to work with him and came across the script and was like, "Hey, I like this guy. I made a movie about his book. Let's do it. Let's work
Garland
together."
wrote a book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dude likes to type away.
I didn't realize he's that old. Some of these guys, man, they're just turning like
Yeah,
whiteheads.
Garland's in like his probably like early 50s. Danny Boyle's like probably 15 years older than him, I would guess.
Yeah. What are we gonna do when these guys are gone?
Cry. That's what I'm gonna do.
God.
I don't think Danny Boyle's that old though. Like I watched an interview with him recently, and he's
70s,
still
not
pretty
that-
like spry and
Sure.
energetic.
Yeah.
But he's always kind of had that cadence. He's 68 years old,
Okay.
so we've got a good portion of time with Mr. Boyle.
7 more years.
Obsessive.
3
7
more movies.
Damn, fucking.
Well,
Clint
but he's
Eastwood
gonna
found dead
turn
in a
into
ditch. Man's 93 years old.
He's gonna turn into what's his nuts that did Napoleon. Like,
Ridley Scott.
yeah, we're gonna get to that point where it's like, Danny, put down the camera.
Danny's trying to figure out the best way to put a camera in an elephant's ass.
Yeah.
Boyle took inspiration from Ebola and rabies when thinking of the visualization of this virus,
Which
the
is
rage
fun.
virus.
That's fun.
Right. The moment where I think it's the chained up soldier zombie
Yeah.
starts like throwing up what looks like this shit liquid,
Yeah.
like this brown viscous liquid, was so effectively disgusting.
Yep.
But also like the rabies thing too. He did it. I think he accomplished his goal. James McAvoy, I guess, auditioned to play an infected person. Don't know how he didn't get it, especially after watching something like Split, where he's ostensibly playing someone who's like filled with rage and losing their mind.
Yeah, that's Mac. Old, that's
That's old Mac.
vetted Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still fresh-faced little boy, James
Yeah.
McAvoy. Let's see. I already touched on the 9/11 thing.
Well, and I gotta imagine too that these zombies that they were hiring, because there's not like the shit ton of them, that
No.
they're probably like looking for.
The largest horde I think you see in this movie is like when they're in the tunnel
Yes.
and they're trying to get the car. But by the way, great scene.
Oh, my
Maybe
God.
like the most tense I felt throughout the whole movie.
That movie, I think there's underlying tension. I think that's when tension surfaced.
Yeah, tension's like breaking the water and just
They're having
reaching out at you.
so much fun, and then all of a sudden, like you kind of, because there's elements in this movie where you kind of just lose sense of the world that you're in.
Right.
And it just is almost like, hey, it's kind of frolicking in the fields.
But you know, as soon as they like come across a tunnel, it's like this isn't gonna go well.
Yeah,
Or,
you
like,
just don't
they're-
know.
They're just gonna be like in danger.
Yeah.
Kind of one last thing I wanted to make sure that we touched on. Obviously, there's a lot of parallels with the opening of this movie where Killian wakes up in a coma in a hospital and wanders through like the devastation of a post-apocalypse. lot of parallels to The Walking Dead and how that opens up with the character of Rick Grimes waking up in a hospital after being in a coma and discovering that there has been an apocalypse.
Is that IP infringement?
So I want to read this quote.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a quote from Robert Kirkman, who wrote the comic book for The Walking Dead that came out in 2003. So I just want you to keep that timeline in mind when I read this quote. So this is from his mouth. I saw 28 Days Later shortly before the first issue of The Walking Dead was released. That first issue came out in October of 2003, and 28 Days Later was released in the States in June of 2003. So we were working on our second issue by the time I saw it. It was going to be a matter of somehow trying to restage the entire first issue, because it was a very similar coma opening. I made a decision, which I pretty much regret at this point. I said, you know what? It's so different from that point on. I will probably never hear anything about this. And I was wrong.
Wow.
So, really does seem like one of those creative parallel thinkings that just happened to unfold that way.
Could be.
Now, are they very similar? Hell yes.
Incredibly.
I still think that they both have their place. I like how sort of like quiet and meditative Cillian Murphy's awakening is when he like wakes up and there's like the slow build of music and there's really like nothing going on. It's just like the empty streets. Whereas like, at least I haven't read the comic book, but in the TV show version of The Walking Dead,
spoilers,
when Rick wakes up and he's walking, this is the first episode. I don't feel bad about saying this.
No, I'm just giving you shit.
Good
spoilers for the intro.
Spoilers for like the
season
first
1,
10 minutes
episode
of
1.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah, after we have Rick talking to Shane.
One of the most
car.
popular shows of all time at the time that it was released.
Yeah.
No, but when he's walking through, there is like more of like this horror, gruesome element to it, that he's like coming across dead bodies and like he sees like the hands coming through the doors, like a very iconic image of like "Don't open, dead inside," or how some people read it "Don't dead, open inside," because the way they put the fucking words together.
Oh, that's how that meme started.
Yes. Basically the apex of it. I still think it's effective in its own way, even if they are very strikingly similar beginnings of these stories.
I wouldn't, outside of the core concept, say that they are the same.
No. Right? Walking Dead obviously doing like the slow zombie thing, more of the focus of like this is a horde that you have to navigate around rather than like fast zombies that you have to outrun. Right.
Well, I'm just saying like them waking up in a hospital room.
Yeah.
Like outside of that, like it's kind of so I think one of the poor writing features is amnesia. Like, hey, character got amnesia or went into a fugue state, which could be effectively done. It's how do we get them into this environment without showing? That's probably so. In terms of lazy writing, I almost put that kind of in this element. But no, I wouldn't. I didn't hold the two against each other, and they are like, it's striking, but at the same token, watching this thing, I didn't go, oh, Walking Dead, right? You know, like there's, like you said, dissimilarities, and outside of the core concept, like if you're starting this as a writer, I feel like everyone's kind of in that boat.
Yeah,
right? Like we have to get you in a protected environment. We have to show you something where you wouldn't necessarily be surrounded by media content, knowing what's going on.
There's the novelty of like finding out at the same time this person is finding out like what has happened, like getting that as a reaction.
Right, because I don't know what else you do unless you want to force feed the audience, you know, and catch them up while the person's sleeping and then have them wake up. Like,
right, you can't start the movie with Mark as the main character because he's already like lived through it.
Right.
That's you're not having this sense of discovery with it.
No, not at all. You know, unless you wanted to go a different route and you're there at the inception of it and you're seeing the chaos unfold while you're going around. But I feel like that's like World War Z-esque.
Or 28 Weeks Later-esque, and that feels like kind of a soft attempt at a restart of what they've established in this movie. But we can talk about it.
I guess I can now see that we may have some differences on it.
Sure. Was there anything else you want to talk about with 28 Days Later that we haven't discussed already?
No. I really, this is a It's a 2-hour film, and I feel like it's very. It's got a little bit of like.
There's the endings. We didn't talk about the different endings.
God, we have to.
So the way this movie ends,
Totally forgot. Now this is I know what I didn't see. So I will say in
Yes.
preface of this, watching this because I know I hadn't seen all of them. The last imagery that I remember seeing with all this is Cillian Murphy kind of banting about the house, right, moving around, zombies out. I remember thinking, all right, he's a carrier, so like I thought he got bit, and so seeing this time I was like, oh, okay, he's making a choice and he's kicking ass. And then it probably stops once he finds the young girl. Because I don't ever remember him finding Naomi Harris and them trying to figure all that shit out. Like, that was all fresh. And then, boy, howdy.
So the way this movie ends is they're all about to escape. Christopher Eccleston's waiting in the car, shoots Jim, and Christopher Eccleston gets murked. And then they are all like trying to escape. They hit the gate. Boom, freeze frame. It looks like they just straight up crashed the car. Cuts to another 28 days later.
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy's laying in bed. He's
Yeah.
got the bandage. This is the only portion of the movie that's uses actual film, by the way.
Oh.
Is this filmed ending?
Because they're like, we can't end it on a freeze frame.
Well, the initial ending was that Jim was going to die, but then they, test
The
audiences
audiences care
didn't
about him.
like that.
They care about him. He can't go. This is unfair.
So then
Soften it up.
they made this ending where they have this big old hello banner as this jet is flying by, and Naomi Harris goes, I think they saw us this time. They're all smiling. Jim's got this like Killian's got this cute little smile on his face, and then the movie ends.
Maybe they did.
Very, very, very happy.
A little bit of hope involved.
Little bit of optimism.
We're going to sprinkle that on this fucking morbid film.
So one of the endings that was filmed was Jim dying of his gunshot wounds. You can imagine that it, probably ended not long after that initial scene.
That ending with him getting like repaired was so Pulp Fiction-y.
Yeah.
Like she's got like this, they got the band to strap the blood. She's got like a needle in her mouth. It's a smash cut. It's like this just feels so thrown together.
In another, Jim dreams of the accident that left him in a coma as he dies from his gunshot wounds. So he's like dreaming of like what
Should've thought
initially
of his
sent him in the
parents.
hospital. Right. Feels a little unfocused.
Yes.
If that were what they ended up with.
That's your last thoughts. What should have killed me?
Imagine
should be here right now.
the last image of this movie is Cillian Murphy getting hit on a bicycle.
Yeah. Like, oh hey, there's mom and.
Yeah, just completely out of left field, literally. The third, a more radical departure, was presented only in storyboards. Instead of Frank being killed by soldiers after being infected, the other survivors tie him up and discover a research laboratory at the blockade, where Jim undergoes a blood transfusion in order to save Frank.
Oh, Frank being Brendan Gleeson.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. That would have been one of the more radical changes that this movie would have undergone if it had gone that route. Because that's ostensibly like a little over halfway through the movie. So you'd basically be changing like the whole structure of the narrative.
That would no, because I think you could still. So like, let's say Frank gets hurt, like they do something where he's comaed up, and they get him in there, and they decide that the human life actually represents much more than just our survival. Like we have to be compassionate, and if we want to continue on, it's not necessarily our wording females, it's taking care of each other.
Yeah.
And the ultimate sacrifice being one life for another. I think that would have been very compelling. That would have been very
It would have been
interesting.
compelling. It would have had like a different philosophical meaning for the end of the movie.
As opposed to hope and optimism.
Well, as opposed to like the breakdown of how humans treat each other in a negative way, via the soldiers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That would have flipped it real quick.
Yeah,
and that would have been. That's what I'm saying. Like I think polarizing would be a good word for it, because that would leave you in a why. Because that's also probably the bigger thing. If I saw that, I'd be like, why did they just flip? Like someone must have gave a speech somewhere, right? Like like it's not just like a. Hey, let's save that guy. Yeah, we'll take him. Yeah.
And real quickly too, like the music for this is great.
Really like the score.
The score's awesome. That specific track, "In a House in a Heartbeat," that plays in the climax when he's like going through the house, is used so much in like YouTube videos and like other movie trailers.
Yeah.
I think Kick-Ass used it for like one of their characters, like having like a significant moment. I myself used it when I was editing in, I think it was 10th grade. We had a project where we launched a rocket.
Okay.
And I put together a video of like the whole class launching their rockets, and when it got to mine, I put this theme in. But I hadn't even like watched this movie yet.
You just knew of it.
But I put this theme in as like, oh, this sounds like a cool, like you hit like a crescendo and then rocket launches.
Yeah.
And then that's when you can kind of let it loose.
Nice.
I'll have to see if I can find this video.
Yeah.
I think it's on my Facebook, but I'll have to like see if I can get it on my computer and then maybe re-upload it to social media.
Yeah.
I think that was all I had to say about this movie. Shall we get into ratings?
Yeah.
Unless there was another thing you wanted to touch on.
I'm not gonna. And some of these times you just soak it in, and there's a little message involved, and it can be very poetic, but not necessarily something that you can just beat over the head with.
Right.
I go first?
Yes.
Okay. I gave this movie, so a little bit taken out, soaked me in. I like the storyline. I think it's also a fun little exercise on, like we said, it's post-apocalyptic, it's zombie, it's humanistic, right? Like there's a couple different things going on to be able to cram all those themes into this movie in a narrative way. I enjoyed it. I like the acting. I did think that it is outdated. It's one of the fun movies where you're watching it being outdated, knowing it's outdated, but also not really caring it's outdated. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, there was like I think I'm trying like very Terrence Malick-y in a sense, and I just have such a hard time sometimes gravitating to those films. I mean, they feel like they pose a lot more than what they're giving.
Right.
But in the end, I did bump this up. I had this at a 7 out of 10. This is an 8 out of 10. This is a very solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'd really have to sink my teeth into this to get it to a 9, and I just don't know if it'd ever get there just because I throw it on and it's like I lived during the time when movies looked like that.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe it's calling me old without calling me old.
Mac, I would never call you old.
Yeah.
Me personally, I would never give you that label.
Film did. Yeah.
Well, I can't speak for everyone. No, I'm pretty much in the same boat. We're in the same boat club right now.
Nice.
I watched this 2 times now, and both times I really enjoyed it. The moments of tension really worked for me. Mm-hmm. The filmmaking was unique and interesting. Love the way it was put together. The performances, for the most part, are great, with the exception of the girl who plays Hannah.
God, I can't let it go.
I cannot let it go. I cannot let it go. I delivered that the same way that she would have delivered the line. And I really do think that this is a unique, engaging touch on the post-apocalyptic zombie genre. So this is also a solid 8 out of 10 for me.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Let's go into
28 weeks later.
28 weeks later.
I was thinking of saying it like the SpongeBob narrator, but I'm glad you did.
Oh, I loved it. I love when he used to say shit like that. All right. 28 weeks later, 2007 film. Oh, directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo.
I think you did it as well as anyone could.
Okay. He also helped out with the screenplay. We have Rowan Joffe that helped out as well, and Enrique Lopez Levine.
This movie had 5 screenplay writers. I mean, I'm sure they're like different drafts.
I also
versions.
heard that Garland uncredited for the opening scene.
Well, also Boyle was involved in that too.
Or maybe it was Boyle that helped shoot that.
Yeah, we can get into it.
Okay. So this is starring Jeremy Renner as Doyle, play on Danny Boyle. Rose Byrne as Scarlett. Robert Carlyle as Don. Harold Perrineau as Flynn. Catherine McCormick as Alice. Idris Elba as Stone. A young Imogen Potts.
Imogen Poots.
Imogen Poots as Tammy.
You just gotta say it how it looks, man. Imogen Poots.
Is she being ironic?
Oh no, I think that's her real name. Do you want to guess what her middle name is?
Those.
Imogen Gay Poots.
Interesting.
Yep.
And then a bunch of other people that are just in this film.
You can't not say the name of the kid that plays Andy.
Macintosh Muggleton.
There it is.
Wow.
There it is.
Boy.
I'm sorry. I couldn't let it slide. We had to invoke it somehow.
Macintosh Muggleton. That sounds like a Harry Potter character.
It really does.
2007 too. How's he not getting those films?
I think I told Drew about the cast of this movie because I was like, "You're not going to believe who's in 28 Weeks Later," and then he pulled up the page on Letterboxd and was like, "Macintosh Muggleton? What is this Harry Potter ass shit?"
Yeah.
And he said that as a fan of Harry Potter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So story goes, it opens up with what you have to imagine as the I believe it's inception of the virus. So I'm thinking it's Inception. They had this town. I think they used the town. It was actually talked about in 28 Days Later. I don't remember what the town was called, the name of it, but it was. There's a little bit of fan theory that they talk about. This is where the virus, part of the outbreak was at.
Oh. Because they filmed in the setting that the movie takes place in at the Isle of Dogs.
Yes, and there's a family, and we got walls boarded up, and we're just not really sure of where we're at. The movie ends 28 days later, where it could be theorized. It's still going on. We're following a different family during the time. We get into a young lad that comes running up to the house screaming, help me, let me in. After we've set up a little bit of the dynamic with this family that we perhaps think we're following, they let the young man in, they're eating, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. So well shot, too, for the tension and just what's happening. Get to a point, we get into this boat, we're out, Don's made it. And then we get the title cards that kind of just lead us up to where are we at now, right? And
we're 28 weeks later.
28 weeks later, we've quarantined the virus. We're starting to set up these pockets of civilization again. We're repatriating. I have such a hard time saying this word. Getting people back into society. We're slowly
reintroduction of civilians.
Yeah, while we have everything, we're getting our systems put back into place, right?
With the help of NATO, led by the United States.
Yes, and the mom in this thing got bit. Thought she was a goner. Don holds some shame and guilt with this, only to find that the mom is not gone. She went back to her house. Did God knows what in there, because that was disgusting.
It's a bit of a grisly scene, yeah.
Grisly. Jesus. And we get back, and we kind of discover some new things about the mom. And Don
and it's not a haircut.
No, it's not. She's also gone daft. She can't talk. The mom thing bugged me. And we find out that she's a carrier. Happens to get to Don. And then we just take it off from there. I mean, it's balls to the walls after that. So, spoilers for 28 weeks later.
So going into this movie knowing that it was not directed by Danny Boyle, was not written by Alex Garland, you immediately have this sort of hesitation of, well, obviously this isn't going to be as good as the original. And there's that kind of low expectation that's already set for you. It's this movie doesn't seem to have that much going for it if the creative force behind it isn't super involved, right? We touched on how Danny Boyle did direct the opening sequence of this movie, which you can 100% see, especially when compared to the rest of this movie.
Yes.
That being said, I don't hate this film.
Shouldn't.
I think it's a decently fine, albeit generic, kind of like zombie outbreak movie.
Yes and no.
You disagree?
A little bit.
Yeah.
So 2007. Once again, I didn't see 28 Days Later, but this was like I think I took a date to see this thing, or we rented this. Yeah. It was senior year, and kick-ass, fast zombies, armies involved.
Did she say, lean in and give me a kiss, and then you leaned in, and then she like bit your whole face, and you became infected? Is that what happened?
Nope. I can say that it infected with what? No. I'm
glad we finally invoked that quote.
Yeah.
During the discussion of the second movie.
No. So, watching this again. So I hadn't seen this since 2007. And mind you, I didn't like. I watched. I don't remember much of it. I was like, oh, okay. They got guns and they're running away. Like, awesome. So I like this time going around. I was very interested with how they're going to continue the storyline. I really enjoyed the universe that they built here. I really liked how they had a whole background. Obviously, they've gotten governments involved. They've talked about how they've quarantined on the island, right? And now they got the Isle of Dogs, and there's another area. They have certain zones blocked off. We are watching to some extent, a build out of what it would be like to create another civilization, right? It was very interesting because you know me, I love hearing like warfare, right? Like this is how we're going to communicate. Like it's not, hey, we got a tango over here. Take him down. I got, it's like we're going into a very realistic setting on how would we build Great Britain back up? How would we bring these people back into civilization? What are we looking at with electricity, plumbing, somewhat of a government structure? Like in this, it's more of an authoritarian sense. Imperialism was kind of coming to mind. But I really enjoyed the first 20. I mean, you go from the opening sequence of Don running, Robert Carlyle getting out of there, into this world building. Like, what do we have going on? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really found it realistic. It felt very much like this was how you'd go about doing something along these lines, and I could not, and I really liked where Don was at. I thought his character just off the bat, especially when we reintroduced the wife again, he's got a lot of flaws, and it really makes you question if you were in his shoes when that event was happening in the beginning. What are you doing? What are you feeling? Now, how are you feeling again? Now being reintroduced, like, hey, hon, I didn't. You would have did the same. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, you've built up this lie. You have all, and you feel these feelings, right? He loved her. All of a sudden, she's back there again, and we've got to figure out how to repair this relationship. Yeah. Like, and then it kind of goes sideways a little bit.
A little bit. I don't disagree with you. I think the point in which like I align myself the most with the idea that like, yeah, the first 20 minutes of this are like very interesting. I think a lot of that has to do with Robert Carlyle's performance.
Yes.
I think he really sells the idea that this is a guy who made a decision that he is like filled to the brim with regret.
Yes.
There is also this idea that if it never confronts him in any way ever again, then he can live with it. If it means like he can have a semblance of a normal life with his kids, then it's something that
survival.
It's survival, but it's also like there is this sort of, and I feel like you see it the most when he tells his kids, there was nothing I could do. I saw your mother die. I saw her get bit and she became infected. There is this sense of him telling the story of like, yeah, there's genuine sadness behind it, but there's also like this tint of, I hope you guys believe me when I say it. Like, you can kind of see it in his eyes that like he's hoping that they believe his story. He's like sad, he's kind of crying, but he's also like looking up at them like, are you buying this? Yeah, is this working?
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to do? I'm a piece of shit, and it's literally like, how do I explain survival to you?
Right, and I think that's just, I don't know, it's a very compelling portrayal of that type of behavior.
No, I agree. I guess it's like two different lenses, but it's the same token of like, I know what happened, I know what I'm living with right now, and I have to get you guys on. But to me, that's where some of the comedy kind of comes in with this of, okay, 99.999% of the people that get bit turn into zombies, like, what are the odds?
Right.
Like, what are the chances of seeing her again? Mm-hmm. And then it comes up, and it's like, I thought there was something there that they butchered just a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought they could have did a little bit more with that relationship and that storyline and how he was feeling instead of turning him into a zombie.
Yeah, the like reckoning of like him as a character, like her coming back. This like sort of complicated feeling of like, oh yeah, I left mom behind, and now I have to like be confronted by that with not only her but also like my kids too.
Yes,
because they're back in the picture as well. Would have like created this really like nice complication of relationships and like navigating this environment while this like horrible thing is happening. Yes. But instead they do make the decision to just make him a zombie,
which like a more sentient zombie.
Right.
Which bugs me in these fucking things where they're like, we're going to evolve them as well. It's like, can you just leave them be zombies and build the storyline around that? Like, why does he have to have thoughts and be a complicated character? So, like, he's a fucking zombie now. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I have no feelings for where he's at with what's going on in his life.
And I don't mind that as a, like, thematic jumping off point, or, like, even something to touch on a little bit in... Because I think there's a semblance of that in Days and Years.
Yes.
In Days, there's the scene where the soldier's chained up, and when they leave the room that the soldier is in, like the infected soldier, there's like kind of this deflation where he like puts his arms down and is like, I want some help. Can you guys please help me? Like there's like this little bit of like something I think in the back of his head that's saying like, I need someone to do something. And then, we'll talk about it later in Years. There's a very more like obvious thing that happens in that movie that I think works. But for this movie to have him be like you were saying, like a haunting specter that's just following his kids around, seems preposterous and, like you said, wasted potential.
Yes, they had a very compelling incident, right? And like storyline B right there, have the four of them, and he's trying to reconcile, right? Because it's a very fun aspect or question of like, you're not going to see this in normal day life, right? Like very seldomly are you going to be in a position where you toss your spouse to save your own self, right? Where it's near certainty of death, right? Mm-hmm. And then to have that after the fact, those moments come up, and now that identifying, right, and the shame, all those emotions that come with it, it's like you can't really write that effectively, right, without putting in some ludicrous storyline of we were on the plane and it went down, we both survived. Like, how about that, right? Like that's not within this element. I mean, within this environment, it's very real, and it just felt like they were like, hey, we're going to turn him into this more sympathetic zombie.
Well, that's the thing that I think it goes in conjunction with what I think this movie ultimately loses, is that sense of like grounded personal storytelling in favor of let's see how this virus spreads and how society collapses once again. Because I think I said in the beginning that this movie feels a little bit like they're hitting like the soft reboot button of let's see the virus unfold because we didn't see it unfold in the first movie, and now we get to see like all the panic and like the soldiers like reacting to this and like society collapsing in real time, versus this is going to be a boots on the ground story of like a few characters that we're following. And I think eventually the story gets to that just a little too late, because there's a good portion of this movie that's dedicated to this display of everyone's getting infected. It's spreading so rapidly. People are running through the streets and soldiers are like shooting at these people. And the disaster is like, this has become the focal point. And I do think that the heart of this movie, or what's supposed to be the heart, fucking Macintosh Muggleton as Andy and Imogen Poots as Tammy, are kind of left to the wayside until like maybe the last half hour of this movie. That was a major issue I had with this, and it's sort of what leads me to call this like more of like what feels like a generic zombie apocalypse movie. Is that we've got all this time dedicated to like these scenes of people panicking,
right? And that's why I go back, because I don't. Yes, but at the time, no, because like we hadn't seen that. There's two things that pop up. One, there's me and Sam talk about it. The Purge. You ever seen The Purge?
I've seen the ending of The Purge.
Okay, so the basic setup is one day a year you get to go out and do whatever you want.
Yeah, everything's legal, including
hedonistic
murder.
Lifestyle, right? Like we're just gonna say whatever happens, and when that bell goes off, it stops, right? One of the problems that we had with it is that you were constrained in this in the house, right? Like 50-60% of the film's just in the house,
right? And I think the later movies they do broaden the scope of that,
right? But point being is, if you look at 28 Days Later, it does feel very contained in the sense of where we at with humans. How did this thing go on? Like it's very much and it looks more at humanity than it does like the virus itself and the zombies. That's why I really like this approach with this, because you hadn't really seen something like this. I don't want to say it's fresh. I don't know how many times or movies that you could point out where like we're seeing the outbreak occur, and it's, to me, it was very fun to watch this happen, because it is something that you fathom, but you're not seeing from 28 Days Later. And all of a sudden the streets are empty, and it's like you can only imagine, right? And where this one, it's actually feeding it to you, and they're doing it in a very open setting. Like we are not just contained to, the basement. Like I know that there's sets,
right?
But we are still moving around the city, and we're looking at what would you do if you were in a governing role over this. Because there's kind of like two thoughts with it. If you're watching it, one, what am I doing if I'm on the street? Two, what am I doing if I'm up on that tower?
Yeah.
And it's almost like watching, genocide happening.
Well, and that's a good segue into what I want to bring up with what I think this movie's about. Mm-hmm. And I didn't find any like other external information, like the director, the writer didn't like speak on this at all. But I truly think that this is what the movie is going for, and you can agree or disagree with me, and it's totally fine.
Yeah,
I feel like this movie is very much a product of post 9/11 United States reaction to invading Iraq and Afghanistan, because that scene specifically where they're on the rooftops and people are running through the streets panicking, there's like infected mixed in with like still human civilians,
right?
They start shooting at the infected, and then ultimately, as it's getting worse and worse, Idris Elba gives the command of shoot everyone on sight, and then
containing it,
making sure the problem is isolated, and there is this idea that they are shooting at an enemy that seems unidentifiable, much the same way that the United States military had to navigate the Taliban and Al-Qaeda when they were going into Afghanistan and Iraq. Right? It seems like there is this mere reflection going on with that as a theme that I didn't see anybody like talk about when I was reading about the production of this movie. But that's very much what it felt to me. It's like, this is U.S. soldiers on a foreign land who can't identify an enemy, who the situation just breaks down for them, and they ultimately just have to say, fuck it, we're just going to kill everybody, and there's not going to be any questions about it. That's the final decision.
Yeah, which I don't know if that's how the approach was at that point or not.
It's very much what it feels like to me, though.
No, I'm talking about like in Iraq. Like I don't know if it got to a point where it was like the end of Vietnam, where it's just
I'm not a military analyst. I can't speak on it exactly, but
so going off that train of thought, though, I do appreciate that then through the lens of kind of how we described 28 Days Later, of using these horror films as being more of metaphors, right? And if we're able to pull that away. With what's going on politically too, I think it speaks to the film itself and the writing of going on, of being able to take something that we view as like a horror genre and being able to use it more as an anecdote or a metaphor to what's happening, with in the first one more about the humanistic element, with people and just dealing with kind of getting reduced to where this one's looking at it more from a political theme, right? Political standpoint, which would, I think at the time, make it ahead of itself with what it was ultimately what we were able to extract from it, viewing it, especially at the time.
I do not hate that as a reading. Like, I think that if that was sort of like the intention or like even a subconscious thought that they translated in the movie, I can get behind it. My issue is that a lot of this movie kind of also feels like an excuse to show off like a bigger budget that they got.
Yeah, I'm not gonna,
because a lot of this movie is like bombing the streets and like special effects, like jets flying through, like this thing that really kind of just feels artificially inserted into what ostensibly is a grounded zombie story, or at least 28 Days was. Right. And then this comes along and is like, hey, check out our new toys that we have.
See, that's right. I mean, I knock this thing more for a little bit of the dullness with the storyline, the characters being weak.
100%, yes.
Some of the like just the escalation of the zombies. Like, when it comes to, I mean, for me at least, when it comes to the premise of this thing, it's really easy now. Like, I don't know how we can say 28 Days. You look at it and go, man, that's original, revitalized. And then you get 5 years later, there's no other zombie movies that really came out besides Dawn of the Dead. And then go, it feels tropey, right? Like, it's still, like, you can't go back and reflect on one and then look at the other and go, like, I do feel like, yes, more action-y, a little less dealing with the storyline outside of unless what you're talking about and those themes are prevalent. I enjoyed that. Like, I kind of liked, and that's why I feel like from the reviews that I read, I'm kind of out there on that. But it felt as if I was watching something play out that would actually happen. Yeah. And a lot of the time in these movies, not everything within this world has actions that make sense, right? Or at least governments or people doing things based off a moral code. Whereas this one, absolutely not. But also in terms of like what are we going to do? This felt very realistic on this is how we'd go about it. But and it also kind of gives you a little bit of...
Yeah, not to interrupt, but I do think that the way things ultimately fall apart and how that's portrayed is interesting. Yeah. And, speaks to what you were saying. It's like, this is not something we usually see in this type of movie. Usually, like, the military is portrayed as, like, trying to save people. They're, like, setting up barricades.
It's already after the fact.
They're, like, going through with, like, turret guns and, like, mowing down, like, hordes of zombies. Yeah. And in this one, it's like, no, this is touching on, like, the confusion of the situation.
Very much so.
This very human dilemma that has taken place in some form.
And you get to see it with Renner having to make a decision, which I also appreciate. I mean, there are elements of this thing that I really liked. I thought this thing fucked it up, pardon my French, but, like... I really was like, man, this thing is so close to being, like, at least for me, a great film. And being able to look at a little bit more of the intricacies of when we actually start involving more groups of people or mass groups, or, like, how would you set up a government? How would you set up a civilization? What are we, like, in terms of building culture? How do we renormalize the population, right? And this had so much of that going on. And then it's like, it's funny because actually once the outbreak happens, that all breaks down. The best part about this, outside of Robert Carlyle and his wife, is Renner making a decision of, like, I'm going to go down there and I will actively save people, right?
And to build off of that, it really does feel like Robert Carlyle and Jeremy Renner are the ones in this movie that have the most going for them in terms of character.
Yes.
And because of the structure of this movie being so situational and everything falling apart, it really doesn't leave a whole lot of room for the other characters to kind of breathe.
Yes, I agree.
Because Robert Carlyle gets this whole intro, and that's all established. And it's like, wow, this is interesting. He's giving a good performance. Jeremy Renner comes in. It kind of catches you off guard, especially like...
He's young Renner at
2025 watching this movie. It's like, oh, shit, Jeremy Renner's in this? I didn't know that going into this.
He wasn't marketed that way because it was young Renner.
Right, and it like really caught me off guard. And obvious like moral dilemma that he's given is interesting enough to where it's like, this gives like this scene some juice. Yep. Even if I'm not a fan of like how it's structured, but then everything else involving Rose Byrne's character, Imogen Poots, the kid who plays Andy, I'm not going to say his name again because it's too funny. they're not giving really much of anything to work with as far as emotional connection.
Right.
And I really do think that this movie needed to pick one or the other in terms of, do we want this to be a display of how this situation fell apart on a grand scale,
right,
or do we want this to be a personal story of these people going through the streets trying to survive?
Right.
And I think that the disproportionality of that is where I rub up against this movie the most.
I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like I guess this thing felt so I'm watching this and this is like a 9 or a 10 for, well, not a 10, but this is like an 8 or a 9 for me right now.
Sure, yeah.
And then once we get to hitting the streets, make it like after that decision, and it's like we're in survival mode to get this kid out of here, you start losing it, right? Because now it's a little bit of a race against the clock with a kid you don't really care about because you never developed an emotional.
It becomes sort of like a cheaper version of like the Last of Us thing of like, this kid has the cure, we need to save him.
Yes.
Very kind of like standard issue zombie plot.
Yes.
So that inherently just becomes a little less interesting.
Yes.
And then when you've just relegated these characters to like running from point A to point B with like no stop time in between, and they only get like a half hour at max dedicated to that.
Yes.
It's like, well, I'm just kind of waiting for this movie to end at this point.
Yeah. Like, where are we going to get to? Like, what? And then it's how do we fill up these pockets, right? And we're going to have some tense scenes, some emotional scenes, or maybe kind of emotional scenes, right? But like nothing that really, that's where the story just falls apart for me.
Yeah.
Because it turns in from like, for me, it's, we're building up society and then we're going to bring it back down. Also, we got the savior here, and how do we get him out? And it's like, pick one lane, you know?
100%, absolutely.
I would have been, if this thing turned into like a political thriller, and then like the ending was just like, now, like, you know how Carlisle gets bit and goes nuts, like if that had been the ending, not necessarily with Don, but like whatever, and then all of a sudden it's race against it, but the whole time it's, how are we structuring this? How are we keeping the infected out? Like I would have been so much more into that. How's he reconciling his relationship with his wife? Renner being the Eric Bana from Black Hawk Down. We start seeing more of his philosophical presence in this outside of just that one decision.
A lot of parallels with Black Hawk Down I was feeling while watching this movie.
Yeah. In terms of the themes, dialogue, or
in terms of just like
how it's shot,
the ever cascading way that the situation just falls apart and like gets more and more out of their control.
Yeah, and it does, but I guess when you only have like the one group, the tension, it lacks tension.
Well, that's where it falters.
Right. Like Black Hawk Down, you have multiple characters, right, in different parts of Mogadishu that you're kind of watching and following and rooting for. How are they going to get it? In this one, it's just these guys, and it's like...
Right. I think Black Hawk Down has more of an honesty with itself about what type of movie it is.
Yes.
Whereas like this movie wants to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think it does. It falters a little bit. I can't knock the first. For me, it's up until I would say, hey, we're hitting the streets with the pyro guys and the fire comes out. Like
Yes.
I am all in up until that point, and then they get out of zone one, and it just turns into like a yawn. With a couple cool shots.
That being said, I do think that this movie works, like CGI aside, because this movie I think implements some kind of dated computer
fire.
effects. That aside, I do think that this movie works for the most part on a technical level, if not as just like an emulation of Danny Boyle's style from the previous movie.
Yeah, just on a grand scale.
Yeah, and when they do get into like the more kind of grounded moments, it does really feel like, oh yeah, Juan Carlos studied the way that Danny Boyle films his movies and emulated it to the best of his ability in a way that didn't feel like he was just copying him. It really did feel like, oh, there's some intentionality behind the way some of this stuff is filmed.
A nice touch.
Yeah. For example, like when they're going through, I think it's like the subway or something.
At the end?
When she's got like the night vision scope and she's looking through it.
Yeah.
That to me was, for the most part, effective, at least visually.
Oh, yeah.
And getting across, like, yeah, we're sticking with like this one POV, and like these characters are navigating this space where they can't see, but we can.
But that's the issue that I have with it is tension, well shot, right? what the fuck? What are we going for? I have no connection with these characters whatsoever. So like, while it is tension, if any one of them drop, I don't know how I feel.
Like at that point, I completely forgot that their goal was to get to Wembley Stadium.
Yeah,
like it sort of was just like out of my mind as I was.
I mean, the goal then turns like get out of the subway.
Right. And I was just kind of engulfed in the technical parts of this without really caring like where they were going or how they were going to get there.
Right.
And
that's where I was at. I mean, I was like, man, this is really great, but I'm also like, I really don't care about the doctor and the kids or whatever. I got to imagine that they're going to make it. So
I think in a better script, I think Imogen Poots could have really shined in this movie. Because she does sell scared teenage girl really well, in my opinion. It's just
not much to chew on.
There's not much for her to work with. So it's just her character just ends up, I'm scared and I have to navigate this environment.
And so the like technical aspects, right? I really like the frenetic pacing in this. He did a good job, I think, of maintaining that energy from the first one going into this. There are times with the camera and some of the cinematography that it really gives you that feel that this is kind of turning on its head. I really like. There's two things. One, the Mark story from 28 Days Later feels like it gets captured in the basement scene, or when they get locked up.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't like how that occurs with Don getting in there because I'm like, this is so stupid. They have everything locked up.
Kid just literally opens the door and his dad's right there.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, how'd you get here, Don? I didn't like that, but I was like, this scene is fantastic in terms of what it looks like when you're talking about something spreading.
It's effectively like claustrophobic and panicky.
Yeah, like put yourself So when you talked about like, are you surviving in this world? That scene is when I got really like my stomach went into my heart, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm making it out of this, and this is like out of my control type shit, right? Like, there's nothing I can do besides not be the one that gets marked. And then the subway scene, like they take that scene with the car and they're like, hey, how do we make this even more effective? And unfortunately, in the first one, we care about those characters. We want them to survive. We want them to get out. And this one, it turns into, it's almost like a video game.
And there's this sense in the first movie of like this looming presence that's getting closer and closer that you can see coming from the shadows of the tunnel. Whereas this one, it's like, this is a good scene that is mostly reliant on like you were saying, the video game idea of like anything can come out at you at any moment.
Cheap effects.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like in it of itself like not the worst thing, but
I thought it was earned. I'm not knocking it on that. I think it could have been. We talked about the first one having a lot of like tension filled, right? Or not filled, but like looming. There was always something in that first one of like, this is a zombie film, but I'm not seeing them. They're gonna pop out at some point. I don't know. When's this get really bad? Where are they at? This one, because the outbreak's already happened, I think you at that point now have to make sure that the audience is attached to these characters who actually care about their well-being and where they're going. So that way, like when you get into that subway scene, it is tense, but there's a certain like either we kind of know it's at the end of the film or we just don't care about these characters. So whatever happens.
It almost feels like too little, too late.
Yeah. So I think it was earned, but in the same regard, it could have been so much more effective had they just tweaked the story a little bit.
100%. I think we're on the same page with this.
Yeah.
Was there anything else we wanted to talk about with this movie? I feel like we touched on a lot of it pretty succinctly.
Oh, one of the fun things that I found out was FUBAR. That became very popular in World War II.
Fucked up beyond recognition.
Yep. And they actually yelled it at one point in this thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a ode or a nod to the army.
I don't have too many notes on this. I only have like 3 bullet points. The theme I touched on of like the response to like Iraq and Afghanistan. The reason Danny Boyle didn't direct this movie is because he was working on Sunshine
with
Cillian Murphy,
which is a
Danny Boyle film.
Yeah, not great.
You don't like Sunshine?
That's all right.
Oh, we're gonna talk about Sunshine one of these days.
I don't know if we have to.
I think we should.
That third act is just beyond right. The third act's FUBAR.
Also, I didn't bring this up last time, but I'll bring it up now. The reason Cillian Murphy got cast in Batman Begins, a movie that we might talk about in the near future,
Dun, dun, dun.
was because Christopher Nolan saw him in 28 Days Later and liked his performance and cast him as Scarecrow.
It's scary. He's a crow. He's not really a crow. He's a bat.
He's
That's
got
Batman.
a drug that makes you scared.
What is this, Power Rangers?
Hey, man. Mighty Morphin. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I had with
Nice.
with 28 weeks later.
I soaked this one in. So it caught me off guard. And there are movies, so when you watch them sometimes you just go like, fuck, they got so close to the sun.
Yeah.
Probably like Sunshine,
So close to the sun.
I'm just talking about that third act. This one probably, I don't know where it fell off. It's somewhere in the middle of the second act, or maybe at the beginning. Like, there's 40 good minutes, and then there's just a bunch of like, fuck, they're just running around.
That's a very common thing I hear about, like, people's opinion of that movie.
Sunshine?
Yeah, and I think there could be a lot of meat on the bone if we talked about it. But we'll save that for another episode,
Maybe.
potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, it'd be your recommendation. I used to have that song as my alarm clock tone.
Oh, yeah, that like kind of orchestral sounding.
Man, that thing was so epic.
You want to talk about other pieces of music that are used in like other trailers and like movie moments. That's another one.
That is a good one. I think they kind of, the song that was used in 28 Days Later, like they hammered it in this one, I thought effectively.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked when it popped up in this, and they felt they used it more often in this, and it every time that it kind of swelled in there, I enjoyed it. Like
Right.
it kind of invokes some feelings.
I think it works in some parts, but in other parts it sort of made me think like it's reminding me of a better movie.
Oh, jeez, come on. Well,
Not that I didn't like this one.
you
but
walked into the scene. You walk into the next one. You're like, "Oh, revitalized, cool. It's fresh." You walked into this, you're like, "Trophy." This is so stupid. It's like there was one other film made before this one.
Listen, I'm not going to be that mean to it. I think we've already said what we need to say.
All right.
Shall we get into ratings?
Yes.
I'll just come right out and say my score. This is a 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay.
This is a movie that I overall enjoyed the experience of viewing it. The expectations that I had going into it was sort of treated like a roller coaster, had its ups and downs. Mm-hmm. The themes that it was touching on I thought were pretty poignant. I thought that the intro obviously was maybe the strongest aspect of this movie in terms of like filmmaking, intention, and performance. I think that this movie has some juice going for it. It just unfortunately doesn't know what lane to stick with when it comes to the structure of it. Mm-hmm. And I think it weaves too much into either lane and just kind of ultimately like stumbles in like that last 45-minute section or however long you want to attribute it. So for me, this is a 6 out of 10.
Nice. I really, like I said, I really enjoyed the first, it had to be 30, 40 minutes. It's, even once Don, I think I got really annoyed once Don got infected, and it's like, God damn it, why?
Yeah. Because there goes your potential.
Oh, I mean, just with the story itself, I mean, like, that he's gonna be reoccurring, and it's like the zombie can think now. Like, is there still something? I don't give a shit. It's a zombie, Mm-hmm. But they're like, some of the scenes are they're very tense, and if not tense, it's almost upsetting to watch. Which I thought it was a little bold.
There's some like effectively upsetting stuff going on in this movie. Yeah.
I mean, like it, and I think that's a little bold. And I at the time I was like, wow, this just. And it's true. At the time, it's like this is kind of generic actiony, not necessarily zombie film, but actiony. Things got to fall apart, right? And then after watching, I'm like, okay, like I think this guy had a couple things in mind. Then outside of that, it kind of falls apart. And if you're really into like a cat and mouse chase with just trying to like a rat getting out of a sewer, like this will be up your alley. Outside of that, if you're into some storyline and character building, it's gonna leave you wanting more.
Yeah,
and
you're gonna be a little underwhelmed.
Yeah, and I had this at an 8 out of 10. I thought they were both on the same level, but I think underwhelmed such a great word with this that I do have to knock it down to a 7.
That seems fair to me. It's a very fair score. So we're going to move on. We're going to fast forward by 28 years
Boom.
into the future, where we're going
Yeah.
to talk about 28 years later.
Great Scott, Marty.
Newly released film came out this year in theaters, probably currently at the time of this episode's release, definitely during the time of this episode's recording. And I want to read the genre that Wikipedia has this listed as, because normally I tend to disagree with a lot of like how Wikipedia labels movies, you know, label something as a horror movie. It turns out to be more of like a psychological thriller.
Yes.
This I think is pretty accurate.
Okay.
2025 post-apocalyptic coming-of-age horror film.
Agreed.
Produced and directed by Danny Boyle. He's
Agreed.
come back. Written by Alex Garland. This is the sequel to 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later.
Yep.
It stars, let me get the cast list up here, stars Alfie Williams as Spike, a young boy who is raised in this community set in the same universe as 28 Days and Weeks Later, where the mainland has been labeled as in quarantine, so it's infected and it's dangerous to step foot on it. But they have this idyllic little community that's on this small little inlet, or I guess island, right? Is it an island or inlet? They're like little habitats. I let you into the community. They've got this little town that's like separate from the mainland.
Yep.
And
There's a causeway.
yeah. Jodie Comer plays Isla, who is the wife of Jamie, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. So they are the mother and the father in this family unit with their son Spike. And one day, I should also say Ray Fiennes is in this movie as Dr. Ian Kelson.
That bastard Kelson.
And this is a story of Jamie taking his son out to the mainland as sort of a rite of passage. We're going to get him his first kill, have him become a man, and
12 years old.
12 years old. They'd say it's a little young, but he thinks he's ready to go out there and get his first kill.
Yeah, it was traumatized young man.
And so we see sort of like this process of Aaron Taylor Johnson taking his son through this world, kind of telling him how it works and what to expect, how to navigate it, how best to like survive the environment. And they run into some issues along the way. There's also this idea of Jodie Comer's character Isla having this unknown at the time illness that she's dealing with.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of trouble in the relationship there as well. So,
yeah.
Spoiler alert for 28 years later.
Yeah.
Now, when the trailer for this movie came out, it was, I think, the #1 trending movie trailer that was released around that time for a while.
I've heard that this trailer has like the most views of any trailer like released on YouTube or something.
It's broken some kind of records, like most, like fastest viewed, like
to 1 million or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And the trailer for this was insanely good. Like, it did a really good job of hyping up the type of movie that they wanted to sell.
Yeah.
With the like Boots poem being read and like the kind of like creepy intervals and like the imagery, very striking, very effective.
Yeah.
Made me really excited for this movie.
Yes.
And I'm glad that we got to go see this in a theater. I'm glad that we got to experience this.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Danny Boyle gets to finally make the follow-up that he wanted to make. Obviously, like, this movie was a long time coming. Big gap in between 28 weeks and 28 years. Originally, he was going to title the potential third movie 28 months later, but too much time has passed in the real world for that to be reasonable, right? At least for like what he wanted to do.
That's what I don't get, but I agree. It's a movie. It's fake.
I'm a sucker for not only post-apocalyptic movies, but post-apocalyptic movies in which it feels so far removed from the thing that has happened that society has kind of undergone this restructuring. Nature has kind of taken back the infrastructure that was created by man, that was left behind, And this movie really feels like it is what Wikipedia labeled it as a coming of age movie. I feel like this is very emblematic of like the type of like medieval storytelling.
I went Native American route.
Okay.
Before the lands were taken by...
I was thinking like Vikings specifically. And
because there's like some Nordic elements, or it feels very Nordic, right?
Yeah, and there's some things that they touch on that I think would help back me up.
I see now. I do agree with that. I can't argue. It felt more, and it may be just because here in the States, but Native American before the expansion, right? Everyone, because it felt very spiritual at moments, right?
Yes.
And that's the only difference that I had with kind of some of the scenery that we were getting with, these archers. And I don't know if that was supposed to be a little bit of a touch on where we're at politically with Britain, where it's kind of gone. Like, I really don't know if there was something more
representative. A lot of people have said that this feels like a commentary on Brexit. And how, like, the UK's decision to cut Europe off from the rest of their like economic activities. Yeah, this is like ostensibly a reflection of that.
Yeah, okay, that's where I was kind of getting like with the scenery of the archers and stuff, and maybe that was kind of the taking over some of these lands. I don't really know.
Yeah, there's like a return to this sort of like primitive way of living that you would see in and I don't mean to use the word primitive diminutively, but like just the idea of like this being a society that has regressed in a way that reflects cultures of like the 1700s or like the 1500s.
Oh yeah,
with like indigenous people or like Viking clans.
A little bit more on the technology side, right?
Yes.
We're a little bit more sophisticated with technology, and we're not talking phones. We're talking like fire, wheels. We have weaponry, right? Diminutive in the sense of being reduced down to only having those facets. We don't have electricity now. We have candlelight, right?
Right. I don't think there's guns in this movie, but they're used by the characters that are from the environment.
Like that contrast.
Yes.
I really like that contrast.
Me too. I'm always I'm always a fan of that as like a favorable choice compared to like everyone's just like stockpiled all these weapons and there's like unlimited ammo and
love that they went
like that.
Bow and arrow route, and then I love when they bring the young Swedish soldier in, and all of a sudden you are seeing how far displaced they are in terms of, and it's a fun aspect to realize, because it's the if I brought you to this different universe, right? Like, hey, like let's say in this universe, they didn't discover the wheel. What's that look like? Like they pull that off in this with this kid's raised in literally the same time this guy is, and he's looking at him like he's a soldier from the future. Like this, and this guy's talking, and hey, it's my Instagram girlfriend.
Yeah.
Check out this automatic rifle I have, and then it's like, oh, Dad only told us about this so you could find him in the houses. Like he's got no fucking clue.
Right.
And it was a very fun contrast to have being brought up, especially the way that they're communicating. And yeah. Anyways, we don't need to jump that far.
No, you're right. It's like that. There's this element of this kid is living out of time with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
and it obviously touches on this greater theme of isolation and like Britain being like cut off from society in a greater sense of like, there is like this. It's almost like you're taking someone from like a different time period and you're placing them in this environment. That's one of my favorite aspects of this movie is just how there is this sense of like this adventurous environment that is dangerous, where it's like it almost feels like a fantasy land at this point.
Well, they're establishing the different types of monsters that you'll run into like you would in a game, right? Like here's your so-and-so types of zombies, here your other types of zombies, here your whatever, and it's like you kind of know the levels that they're at and the challenges that you'll face. So it very gives it much of a like Zelda open world journey, that you're kind of navigating and you know where you got to get to, and the threats that linger.
Yeah. There's like this tutorial aspect of, we're going to get you in this dangerous environment and you're just going to learn how it works.
Yeah.
And I love the evocation of, and I say Viking sort of influence because one, the celebration when the kid comes back is very kind of like Mead Hawley, like we're gonna regale like these tales of this kid's triumph. We're gonna like sing his songs and these praises.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of like swashbuckling element of like this tribe that's celebrating.
Yep.
And also too, when the soldier Eric, who's I think he's like a Swedish soldier, describes himself as a Viking. And it's funny because the people in this situation, Alfie and or not Alfie, that's the actor's name.
Alfie and
Spike.
Joey. Yeah, Spike and
Jamie.
Jamie
Feel more like a reflection of like what real Vikings were probably like.
Yeah.
Than Eric does, who is a NATO soldier who has an automatic weapon.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you're crossing time like universes.
Yeah.
Which is very
it's one of my favorite parts of this movie.
Yes, and that's a good pull with the Viking element, because I mean it's kind of like with the vibe that you're getting throughout this film. The way it's shot is very isolated, little to no infrastructure, you know, and it's very
the scene in which they're running back on the water, because the tide's like high, but it's like low enough to where they can still run on the path.
Yeah,
feels so ethereal to me.
Where it's like they're entering heaven.
They're running to paradise.
Yeah.
They're like running back to the gates of Valhalla.
Yes.
And like this giant Viking looking monster is like chasing them.
Yeah.
And I just love the imagery that's evoked there.
It was good.
Was very pleased to watch this in a theater where it's like, yeah, these images are really striking.
Oh yeah. You get the grandiose effect of what you're soaking in, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, as you can tell, I enjoyed this movie. I think it's good. I'm glad that we're able to discuss it. I think there's a lot to touch on where I'm having a hard time like deciding where to start with it, you know.
Wherever. What do you think of Aaron Tyler Johnson's character?
I think his character is interesting. I like how, because it almost seemed like if you're just watching the trailer for this movie, you'd think he was the main character. Mm-hmm. And then you go into this film and you slowly realize, oh, the main character is the kid, is Spike. And we're like learning things from his perspective and like learning not only just like how he is navigating the world, but how the world has changed since the previous films.
Yeah.
And like obviously we get like a little bit of a flashback in the beginning of like things falling apart right away, which is an interesting misdirect. Because we think that kid
is Spike
Aaron
Tyler Johnson.
We think it's Aaron Taylor Johnson, and it ends up being another character that shows up later.
Yes,
which is fun.
Great reader, misdirect.
But you do get to learn about his character through the eyes of the kid, and I think it's interesting how like multifaceted he is. He's not like a total piece of shit. Right. Like he's ostensibly like a good dad. He's teaching his son like valuable lessons along the way, but he's also
flawed.
He's flawed. He's an alcoholic who is cheating on his sick wife, and there is this idea that like this is a very human character still, despite like this seemingly idealistic town that they live in and like the situation. There's still this underlying piece of his humanity that just can't reckon with the problems in a healthy way, right?
Yeah, healthy way is good. It's I'd agree. I mean, I thought it was more of this look through Spike seeing his dad in this lens, and we've only as an audience seen the dad through this lens and being able to see the fractured side, that other side of him, you know. So coping in an unhealthy way does make sense. Also looking at, I mean, that's not out of the realm of how day-to-day people cope. You know, and it was more so of, I really liked in my head thinking about this being like, this is going to be a coming of age story, and it's very funny that there is more danger in finding out the humanistic side of people than it is being out in the world killing zombies. Mm-hmm. They much more appreciated and were willing to have him take a bow and arrow out and kill something versus figuring out what I do in my off time. Right. How do I handle the world that we're given? And I thought it was very interesting, and you can see that confusion and frustration in Spike, you know, as soon as it occurs. And I Yeah, I didn't. It's not faulting. What is his name? Jamie.
Yeah.
Right. It's not. It's a very real world look at someone that's trying to cope through this stuff, or at least developing his own coping mechanisms, whether healthy, unhealthy.
Because when Jamie's taking Spike through the world,
Yeah.
and we have to remember that Spike is seeing all of this for the first time. Like, he doesn't know what another life is like. He doesn't know what a life of like television and like comfort and like a normal previous society was like.
It's all through books and images and stories.
Right. So he's born into this world. So to him, it feels like there's like a purpose to it. It feels a little bit more natural, a little bit more of like, oh yeah, this is how the world works. So then it's how it's supposed to be. And then the idea that like the main conflict of this movie, or I guess not the main conflict, but like one of the major conflicts of this movie comes from the revelation that his dad is cheating on his mom, is
totally called that out too, by the way.
right. You can clock it as soon as like the lady
He's
shows up and
out,
like
hey, what's
they
up,
give
Rosie?
each other a look.
Yeah, I was
yeah.
like, there it is. I
I'm
wonder
like,
if this is gonna.
Wait a minute, that's not his wife.
Yeah, he's not a scumbag. He wouldn't do that.
Are they poinking? Are they doing something they shouldn't be?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there is like this idea that like once he finds that out, it is this thing that he has to reckon with, makes more of an impact on him emotionally than, oh, I just shot a zombie through the head.
Yes.
And that's very fascinating to me, and I'm glad they explored it that way. If I do have like one, not like hang up.
One hang up? Oh,
not
jeez. We're maybe on different wavelengths.
It's not a hang up necessarily. It's a very minor thing that it's not even going to factor into the score that I'm going to give
That's
this
how that
movie.
14-year-old girl acted, isn't it?
Goes way back to the first movie.
Yeah.
Carries over. I do think that it is a little bit hard for me to accept Aaron Taylor Johnson as a father of a 12-year-old, because I'm still so used to seeing him as like young Aaron Taylor Johnson.
That's your gripe?
It's not a gripe. It's just like, it's something that I had in the back of my mind, because the movie starts and I'm thinking like, oh, is it like his little brother that like they have like a huge age gap with or something? Like their dad has like, you know, maybe they have different moms or something. No, just father and son, which is fine. Like as the movie progressed, I got behind it a little more as their relationship unfolded, but it was like a bit harder for me to jump into, oh, Aaron Taylor Johnson is a father of a 12-year-old. And instead, when that initial scene started, I was like, oh, is he like his little brother or something?
Sure.
Or is he like just this kid that he like befriended and is now going to like go and teach him or whatever?
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. Maybe I'm silly for thinking that, but
It's your thoughts, man.
My thoughts are oftentimes silly.
You won't. I am also interested to hear how many more people are on the same, because I like when you have thoughts like that, I'm like, no, there's nothing that he looks 30 and that's good enough, and we're living in this world where he could have had a kid when he was 16.
Because Jodie Comer, who is like 3 years younger than Aaron Taylor Johnson, to me had more of the energy of like, oh yeah, she's his mom, than Aaron Taylor Johnson initially did in that opening scene.
Yeah, but you've got to take out some of the norms of what you're expecting a society to operate within the boundaries of environment that they're in. Like, this is a very much, I'm going to teach you how to survive. My role isn't now fostering your education, making sure you get a good job. It is literally like, I'm going to die in the next 10 years because we don't have medicine, and you are going to have to hunt deer, the bounds and bounds of deer out there without getting killed. You know, like I thought it was their relationship was odd to me, but it's also in the sense of I need to do the best I can to build up his self-esteem and ego while also making sure that he is self-aware for what is happening around him. And it is odd, but like I was like, okay, like I was like, he's praising him a little too much. Then all of a sudden, when shit goes wrong, he's like, I feel like you can't just go from like great job to what the hell was that, you know, like. So, I didn't have any issues with it, and
right. And it's a thing in which like, okay, it's pretty quickly like reconciled with as the movie progresses, and we get to see their dynamic play out in this environment. And I do really love that scene where they're in the attic and the kid is like, he's panicking, he's like feeling bad about it, he wishes he could have done more.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you crying? You didn't do anything wrong. You did your best. Not many people would have like stopped and shot at them. Like you did what you had to do. Like,
yeah,
he is genuinely like a good supportive father.
Yeah.
In a lot of instances of this scene.
Yeah.
And which makes the revelation that much more powerful, and like him getting angry, and like he doesn't take it out on his son, but he takes it out on like the wall as he's like walking by. It's like, dad hit drywall again. Like,
I could relate to him when he did. I was sitting there, I was like, man, you take that knife, and then like, so he grabs it and he's shaking, and then he stops shaking hands. I was like, he just poured all that hate and energy, you know, the pissed offness into that knife, got it out, soaked it into the knife, handed it to him, and then boom, boom. And it's like, you know, you just get so damn frustrated, because also, I mean, it's not out of his control, but there are things that are happening that it's like, I wish we had a different life right now. You know, he has experienced the technology and the TV and all that stuff. Like, he knows what he's missing. You know, they're on this island, and he has gone into the role of what he is now, assuming, because I guess if he's like 30, 35, and this is 28 years later, he was 7, so maybe a little taste of it, right? Mm-hmm. But, yeah, and I mean, shit, I don't know. If you were 7 and all of a sudden had to go live on Mackinac Island, you know, like, and you got to be this age, do you think you'd be like looking back when you were 7, thinking about some of those things that had happened, you know, and what you're missing out on? Like, and that's what I think makes his character really compelling. I really liked his character. Like, dirty, yes. Was it a bad move? Yes. People are flawed? Yes. I thought all of it played in there, and I'm trying to think of what we were watching. It was on here, and they talk about, you know, being your parents are flawed, and it's one of those things when you actually get to that revelation and see that stuff, because like when they're
the first time when you're a kid and you realize like, oh, your parents are human beings who like make mistakes,
right,
and stumble and aren't perfect.
It's a very
like,
weird
it kind of
notion.
shatters your worldview a little bit.
Yeah, and that's where he got to, and I thought it was I enjoyed all of that.
A lot of that too is carried by Alfie Williams' performance. This is his film debut.
He's great. He's fantastic.
I thought he was excellent. One of the most compelling, like, real kind of like kid performances I've seen. And
charming. He was scared. I mean, he did it. He did it, the emotional spectrum and hitting. I thought he did really well.
The best instance of this is his relationship with his mother, played by Jodie Comer.
Yeah,
I thought was the most emotionally effective part of this movie. And when it comes to that like final scene, because like we see the buildup of it like throughout very effectively. There's like quite a bit of it too, but it doesn't feel like it's overbearing. It feels like, yeah, this is what the movie is hinged on, which you might not have initially thought about when like it's him and Aaron Taylor Johnson going out and like him getting his first kill. But it is like, yeah, this is what the movie's building towards. And so like the moment when he like sneaks her out is really striking. And the discovery of like what it is that she actually is dealing with turns out to be cancer that's spread to her brain, and the ultimate decision of like, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna let her go.
Yeah, we're
gonna learn about the death of a loved one was very emotionally impactful for me. Left me feeling like I had like my heart sunk into my stomach a little bit, which I don't often get when I watch movies. Even when I think something is like emotionally effective and I'm like engaged with it, I'm still able to remind myself like, okay, I'm watching a movie. This is compelling from a narrative perspective, but otherwise like, you know, there's still a level of disconnect. With this, it's like, wow, I genuinely feel a level of sadness that not a lot of movies get me to.
Nice.
When the mother dies and like he's putting the skull on top of the spire and there's like the sun rising. Yeah. It's super effective for me. I don't know if you felt that same way.
Did not.
No.
I had this thing is tonally out of whack. Really? It got. Yeah.
I think it's pretty consistent, bar like the last 2 minutes.
This thing is they're introducing new elements, and rightfully so. I like the compare and contrast, but when it's shifting all sorts of the spectrum. I mean, like we're moving in and out of certain phases. We're moving in and out of certain emotions. Like once you kind of grasp, you get to that point, and I didn't. I didn't necessarily see it coming. So like I should have been more impacted when it learns, and it's like, you know, at this point, it's just so hard to. I don't know. It like the sense of reality or the groundness that it had, it really turned more into like a mythos as we were going throughout this. Mm-hmm. And that's what really caught me off guard. And I think that there's some cheap humor in this. There's some jump scares in this. There's, you know, we're dealing with the evolution of zombies. We're going to touch on these zombies, but we're not really getting into what we know about them. It drifted so much on me, and I think it's because of the fact that this was the central storyline of this coming of age, and this, you know, it's almost like Tree of Life-esque, you know?
Yeah.
And there's so much else that has to surround it because it's a post-apocalyptic zombie movie. And it felt like filler, but it was distracting. And that's why I didn't, once it got to that stage, like I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to happen. I was like, oh, boy's got to learn. Is what I got to, you know?
Right.
And that's why it just did not have that. And it sounds like you buried yourself more into the film than what I probably did. But I think the fluff that surrounded it just distracted me too much to really, you know, get into it.
I think I was able to get on board with most of what was going on, because to me it was like a lot of what's being introduced seems to be central in, okay, how is this influencing the kid? Like, how is his worldview shaped by the things that are happening in reflection to things that we experience in everyday life? So, like, for example, and, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this even more, but the scene in which the infected woman gives birth is, like, probably the first time that this kid is learning about, like, the birthing process and, like, how life is introduced into the world, albeit through this really fucked up way. And that is like,
how did it happen?
How did it happen? This is like a problem, but
maybe
nevertheless it still happens. And so then it's like,
well, it's got to be a problem,
right?
You'd assume so.
Most likely a problem. But again, it is like that thing of like, yeah, this is a reflection of like what we experience in the world that we live in, just in such a warped way. Of like, yeah, this kid is gonna, like, this is now like a core memory, an experiential like nugget that he is gonna live with him every time he thinks about this is like an aspect of life.
Now, let's say we take out the birthing aspect and we show two zombies having sex. Do you have the same, like, okay, like he's seeing this for the first time, he's taking it all in. This is a very humanistic part of life, or it's a creature's part of life, like reproduction.
Sure.
Like, my point is, you can substitute some of that stuff, but without having certain rules laid out, that's where it loses its groundness. That's all I'm saying. Like, I do get, like, I get that point, you know, the birthing process and seeing all this stuff and life being formed and created right before your eyes. And I don't know how many 12-year-olds get that, and I don't know what he saw on the island, but also we're just going to introduce this zombie with it. And it's like, I have so many more questions about that than what this kid's taking from that. You know, like that's where I lose it a little bit, is from there are elements that are brought in where it's in this warped reality, but also within this warped reality, we're kind of just going into, we're having fun with it. And that's where the two other films were so grounded in reality. I mean, I hate to keep using the same phrase, but like, we're looking at this from a very realistic viewpoint of what's occurring, even with these things happening around it that obviously aren't fathomable. Right, wouldn't happen. But this one was the first time where I was like, this feels like now we're putting like things on and just having fun, and to me it was distracting.
I could maybe see that. I think I didn't have too much of an issue with it.
Right.
I think it all served like the purpose of this kid's perception and how it's shaped versus like how we're seeing it with like the reality we live in. But I can see how there's like this disconnect.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's what I'm not knocking. I mean, I'm happy. Like, it's very spiritual and a coming of age, and I was like, it's a really fun look at being like, all right, like you know, name the film and insert it into this, and all of a sudden you're dealing with zombies, and all that stuff. Like, once again, taking this and kind of using it thematically in different ways outside of just being straight horror, right?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get past some of the distractions with what was going on and raising more questions that I really didn't want to have while watching this, and that
Sure. Yeah.
like the guy gets he's ripping off skulls and they're throwing it into the trees and stuff. And it's like, that's fun. But also this is now taking like a weird turn,
I like that as like a creative sort of pivot of like, yeah, now we're making the infected more of a monstrous force rather than like used to be people, like these used to be human beings that like wear clothes and have like accessories and like recognizable qualities of like a human being.
They're
with,
given
like,
the
face
zombies
and eyes.
identity.
Right. And like with this one, it feels more of like, because they're all naked and like decayed to a certain degree, it's like, oh, well, they're like, this is like almost like a new species that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. These are like monsters or like demons in a way, especially when it comes to like those scenes where it's like the night vision, like coated in red, and you see them like eviscerating a deer. To me, it was like so animalistic and told me that like, oh yeah, these things are beyond like the things that we saw in the previous films.
That's where now. I guess I don't know. It's it's a creative step. I can't. I think it's because I'm too literal. Like I think I'm cursed with that because I'm watching. I'm like, took humans, over 200 million years to evolve. These things get fucking 20 years, and they're beyond what we can, And it's like, there's nothing about the rage virus. There's nothing, and obviously strands evolve, and you're looking at, but like, doesn't happen that quickly. Now, I don't know if there's something that you throw in there. Like, there's nothing that you could do in this one. It just felt like too much of a leap for me.
Sure.
Because it's one of the things that I just hate about these things is like, it feels so video game-esque, right? Where we have to up the stakes, and instead of upping the stakes, we'll just up the boss, right? And it's like, we'll take that next step. It's like, you have so much here right now. I don't know if we need to get away from what we got, and obviously it gets pretty redundant when you don't.
Feels like a hat on a hat sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm not going to knock it on that, but it was just a little too, without having more explanation going on, and it was just, anyways, I mean, it is a very touching scene with the skull getting on the spire and him kind of growing.
Our favorite deacon from Conclave, Ray Fiennes, showing up.
Oh, he's great.
His bald head, his fucking ratty tank top, collecting skulls everywhere.
Yeah.
Fucking great.
Ratty tank top. Yeah.
I mean, it's fucking
soaked in iodine.
It is ragged.
Yeah.
It's a little worse for wear, but he is great.
Yeah,
I love
fantastic.
him in this movie.
I did too.
Pops up, does what he needs to do, delivers like some of the most emotionally resonant dialogue when it comes to like reconciling with the death of this kid's mother, and the idea that despite all these like spires and like bones and like these tributes that he's made of people who have been deceased, there is this acknowledgement that he has like, just like everything, this will turn to dust and no longer be here, but for right now,
this is like your ethos. That's why you're vibing on this.
This serves as a reminder of our mortality.
Yeah, you vibed out hard with this thing.
Right. And I don't know. I just love that.
I did too. It's poetic.
I love that as like a motif, and that also as like an influence of this kid's worldview.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, do I want to view the world this way? Of like, death is just like such a natural thing that we can be sad about it, but we shouldn't try to like look at it as like the worst thing ever.
No, I think it's more of these were all people. While we are killing and taking out, these eyes have seen things. This mouth has tasted things, right? These phalanges have touched things. Like,
good use of the word phalanges.
Yeah, there was a person behind this, and while it is, there's some sorrow involved with this. Like, it's important. This is part of that next step in our journey, right? And that we can still have some remembrance of what these people were. And while I don't know this person, I know that they've experienced some fashion of life, right? To get to, and then become zombies, unless they're reproducing and been going on for a while. You know what I say? born a zombie, always a zombie.
But it is interesting that kid is born, and it's ostensibly seems like, ow, Piper just jumped on my leg, and I felt her claws in my skin. The kid is born, and it seems normal for all intents and purposes.
Baby,
the baby,
Lisa.
Yes, doesn't seem like there's anything too wrong with it.
We don't know yet.
At the moment, we don't know yet.
Yeah, which is another perplexing thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Guess we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I think the reason why I like that sort of stuff with the way that they introduce this idea of like, oh, the alpha infected and like kind of how they operate and this sort of like new look at this thing that we're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Danny Boyle is excited to explore this in a way that feels fresh and new.
Agreed.
And I think I kind of like take that into consideration along with like all this stuff that's being introduced to us like this after this much time has passed.
So I don't know if from what I've heard, he's going to make this into a trilogy now.
Yes, so I can speak on this. Nia DaCosta is directing the next movie because they filmed it at the same time they did this movie.
Perfect.
It's supposed to come out in January of next year, called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Alex Garland also wrote that and is writing the third one.
Nice.
The third one, Danny Boyle's coming back to direct.
So once again, taking a break and then 80 years old directing. Not 80. He'll be in 4 years or something like that.
It's not 80.
He'll be 80 when it gets released.
But yes, there are future plans for this as like a greater franchise.
I would have maybe. I don't know because I had a hard time with the way this thing. It ended fun, but it did not. I was like, it fit into just how tonally skewed this thing was. I felt like, I was like,
that is the thing with this movie where. I'm on board for like most of what's happening.
Yeah.
I even like the way it ended. I do agree. It does kind of like take a little bit away from like the emotional impact of what had taken place before.
I think that happens like at points in this thing where and I don't know. Yes. Yeah. And that's how I felt at least at them too. Cause like this thing ended, I was like, oh, okay. And then I went, feels about right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe it's just like coming off from 28 Weeks Later being pretty devoid of like any sort of like humor or
I watched 28 Days
levity.
And 28 Weeks back to back on Friday night.
Right.
So like both of them were fresh and this was so much different than how those two were made.
This feels more of like a Danny Boyle movie that's a product of like kind of 2010s Danny Boyle. Like we're gonna have like a little bit of fun with the environment that this is set in.
Yes.
There's gonna be a little bit more like cheekiness.
Yeah.
A little bit of like energy that you didn't quite get from the last movies. Piper jumped up on the table again. Piper, get down. Come on, girl.
Oh, we're solving issues. All right.
If you heard her meow, it is because I had to surgically and kindly remove her from the setting. Sorry, baby.
Nice use of words.
Anyway, to me, it feels like this movie is different from the other two, mostly because of like, there's a lot more like humor injected into it.
Yes.
There's like a bit more of like cheeky. This movie feels very cheeky.
100%. 100%. And I think that's a little bit of maybe where it just didn't resonate with me. And I think it's really just because watching those two back to back and then walking into this one didn't really strike me as how it would follow up. So I also could be because of expectations. Mm-hmm. For a coming of age, I really did like this. I really liked the kid and I really liked the story and where it was going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just done perhaps a little bit differently, or maybe me having not watched those two films before seeing this one. I might have had a different view.
Let me ask you this. What if the cock was like 3 inches smaller? Would that have improved your perception?
Dude, fucking helicopter that thing and just start taking out like the army guys.
Make it 3 feet long. Is what I say.
Carry him into the air like he's turning into Bizarro Superman.
I have to mention this because it is very funny. So I have a coworker.
Yeah.
Who is interested in this movie, and he has a 14-year-old son.
Oh.
And he came up to me and was like, hey, I kind of want to take my son to see 28 Years Later. You know, I think it'd be all right if I took him. I heard there's like hella cock and balls in this movie. So if you see it before I do, can you let me know? I'm like, yeah, I'll let you know. And then sure enough, like...
You told them, nope, you're good.
I'm like, take your son and your daughter.
Yeah.
No, I of course told him that there is a huge, meaty zombie schlong in this movie that is just swinging all the time.
Ray Fiennes has no qualms getting his head next to.
Right, yeah.
Like, pleasantly happy that he put him to sleep.
And it's one of those things where, like, people were talking online about how, like, oh, yeah, it's a little distracting. Like, I couldn't help but think of it during this scene that's supposed to have like tension in it. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, come on, this can't possibly be the case. And then I see it and it's like, this is like a Pringles can.
Yes.
And
it's got its own zip code.
It's definitely standing out. I don't hate it because I think it is part of, I think it's part of like the Danny Boyle of it all. Like where he's trying to be a little bit more kind of like fun and silly with it.
Yeah, no, to me that stuff, it doesn't bug me at all. That's not it. Like there's the cheat, like I mentioned, I mean, we've got a kid coming of age, he's with his dad, we're going out, we're killing, there's tension, we've got the somewhat of the evolution of these zombies. And then it's just kind of, hey, we're going to have fun with the world around us. It just felt so, you know, it just was shifting on me. And I like the first act of the second act, like I think you'd say feels different in terms of tone and, you know, where we're kind of going and what we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I have gripes, because then it turns into a very, not morose, but we're dealing with death. We're learning about death. I mean, this is not we've just killed something. Our mother's gone.
Yeah.
Right. Very sad, heart wrenching. And then we got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers ending the thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I'm saying it just, I get cheeky and fun, but you can also be in a fun house and be like, this is a little too much.
Right. Little too grating.
Also, what do we have? So apparently they had to have those prosthetic limbs or joints or whatever the hell you call that thing.
They had to have the genitals be prosthetic because the way child labor laws are, you can't have an actual naked man on the same set as a minor.
Okay. Now, my question then is, one, what's the difference? Two, is it weird that this kid's 14 or 12 and we've got all this stuff going on around him? Like, am I old man Mac with this, or is this like...
I'd be curious to, like, if I were to rewatch this movie, is there the dick in the same frame as the kid?
Yes. When he's on the subway. Like, he's staring it down. Like, his eye, like, he goes like this. He doesn't do that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's...
Mac just did a motion that was like the gif of the kid from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, where he like is waving and then he like looks down.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of at. I mean, he's like the pregnant scene going on. I mean, that's a naked lady right there. It threw me off. Like when I was like, so it's really funny when you're thinking about it too, because credit to, you're watching this not going like, that's a 12-year-old kid with a bunch of naked people, right? It wasn't until after you start reading about it, it's like, is it inappropriate, not inappropriate? Is this kind of the next step is in terms of us as society with what we're willing to accept, or maybe like what we need to get to? Like, is this sex education now getting played into all this stuff that we can't have? You know, like, are we looking at this in a political sense of like, hey, instead of dumbing our kids down and sheltering them, like we need to expose them? Like there's a couple things, and I was like, I wonder what this Spike, Alfie kid thought. And also, I don't know, like when, I bet you I could talk to a bunch of different people. I'd probably hear about 30 different answers.
Be curious to see if there's like an interview or like a quote from Danny Boyle or like Alex Garland about that as a scene.
Kid used it as a bludgeon. You just run around with it and they'd hand it to that guy.
It's heavy foreshadowing in that he's going to use it to escape a situation. I don't know.
Yeah, he's gonna throw it over the wall and climb it down, like
use it as a paddle for his boat.
Yeah, Rapunzel's hair.
Right, grappling hook.
Yeah, Batman just. Whoosh.
That's a good amount of penis talk, I will say, for
nice.
I think for this section. Yeah. Let's talk about I feel like with all these movies, we got to talk about the way this was filmed. So this was shot primarily on iPhone 15 Pro Max cameras.
Yeah.
Mostly iPhone filmed movie. That was a heavy sort of source of information when this movie was being made. It's like, holy crap, Danny Boyle's at it again. He's using iPhones.
Cheeky bastard.
Cheeky bastards using iPhones to film his movie. Because, like we touched on before, Danny Boyle prefers to have the mobility of a smaller, more dynamic camera than the kind of bigger, clunky, like over-the-shoulder film type cameras. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, at least in this regard, in these types of films, I think it adds a little bit more to the element of being in the scene, right,
Yes.
as opposed to setting up the scene.
So I read that some of the actors performed their own camera work. So you'd get people like running through an environment, possibly like a lot of POV shots. More than likely, Alfie Williams is holding the camera himself, or like Aaron Taylor Johnson's got like a rig attached to him when he's like running through a house or something.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool. I think that like getting the actor involved in that really makes it more kind of like immersive and engaging for me. What I want to ask you about this specifically, what did you think of this, what Danny Boyle refers to as like the bullet time effect happening when a zombie gets shot with an arrow and it like kind of pauses for a bit, does this like kind of rotating shot. It's very stylistic, and then shows it from like a different angle for a moment before it like continues the continuity.
Yawn.
Weren't a fan of it?
No. It's the same thing with like, you know, your the hell was that movie called where they would curve bullets? Wanted? Like there's some of these things that happen where it's just okay, I'll just preface it this way.
Yes.
Throw that in there, take out some of the awkward jokes. It's like we're gonna birth a zombie. We're gonna like you can have one or the other. You throw so much at us it turns into a carnival. And it's something that's well written like this and well acted, we don't need a carnival.
I think it's a little bit of a step too far because for the most part, I like the way this movie's filmed. It's very like exciting, and it retains a lot of what I like about Danny Boyle's filmmaking style. I do think that specific effect of like this bullet time thing, air quotes bullet time because they're arrows, is a little too distracting for me.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
Like it kind of takes me out, and it makes me think more of like, oh, Danny Boyle's having fun with this as like an editing trick versus, oh, I'm engaged in the narrative of what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's like that impacted you. There's more of that surrounding it that impacted me. Like because they get away from that. I think that's very like in the first act that they're doing a lot of that, and then I feel like they kind of got away from that.
Right.
You know, I didn't really see much of it once we started getting out into the mainland with the mom.
Yeah.
But that annoyed me.
Do you think the strongest part of this movie is? Do you favor the like first 30 minutes when it's him and Aaron Taylor Johnson going through the island, or do you favor the part when it's him and Ray Fiennes?
My favorite element of I'll tell you, there's 3 points that I really liked about this, and the ending I'm torn on. The first 30, setting everything up. Right, we got this rite of passage. It's kind of where we're leaning into a coming of age story. That scene on the causeway with them running was very tenseful. I really liked how you described it. Felt like they're running into Valhalla. You know, it's like you're running on the edge of the earth. Very, very stylistically shot, but well done. I really enjoyed the contrast when they introduced Eric.
Yes.
That was just a fun story and a fun thing to have going on.
Yeah.
And then I really liked the whole stuff with Ray Fiennes and the mom, and it's that journey of life, and it's the understanding and learning about death that we always struggle with. How do we talk about this? Like that's still something that they won't have in like textbooks. Like you're not going to teach a high schooler about death, right? It's a very humanistic approach to how are we going to handle this, how are we going to cope, how are we going to accept this, but also like there's like the beauty in all of it, right, with like what people find in death, and that this person, this flower, this creature went on its journey and it has experienced and lived a life, and we can remember that. And then outside of that, everything else was just kind of like he's trying to have fun. He's trying to be cheeky. It's very stylistic. We're trying to have jokes in here. We're throwing in like weird floating bubbly zombies that are coming up to try to eat you, and then the mom snaps out and saves someone. Like, there's just like things that happen in here. Like, this doesn't make sense, and I don't know if I'm like, Frank moviegoer where it's like, I need this explained to me, but or is it like okay, do I just accept that they can have kids now and that the alphas can communicate and that they're starting to process thoughts, that evolution has gone on?
I'm wondering if who knows how the next two movies are going to play out. I'm wondering if a lot of this is serving the purpose of like, we're going to set up these questions to answer in the next movies. Maybe there's a little bit of possibility there. I don't know.
And if they do, that's awesome. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily. It might actually make me like this a little bit more.
Right.
But also, I wanted. Okay. Zombie baby happens. This is all like, what the hell, right? Warped world. Let's have a little bit of dialogue on that too. Then let's start postulating some theories out there. Let's start talking about how could this be possible, and that way, as the characters are going through this kind of questioning it, we are also with them on the question, right? Because now they're just accepting it, and I'm the one going like, am I out of my mind watching this? How is this like, you guys are cool? Like, does anyone else want to know? So wow, I can't believe this happened. This must have, and I think Ray Fiennes does like a tad bit. And it's just like, look,
they give him a little bit of like, this is like,
this baby's unaffected. How about that?
Right.
It's like, no shit, dude.
Right. But they don't linger on it too long. But again, it didn't really bother me too much. Well, just because like, it's an experience that they are taking in that like the kid obviously like isn't familiar with, and Jodie Comer is kind of like out of her mind.
Yeah,
and
but
I don't know. I don't think it's too much of like a leap for me to see that playing out how it did.
Here's the thing. Jurassic Park. Okay, Jurassic Park. They're walking through genetically dinosaurs, all this shit. Guess what they find? Eggs. How did this happen? Boom, two frogs, fuck. They can have X and Y chromosomes apiece. You got babies. Nice. All right, cool. That's it. That's all I need. I don't need like the whole diving, but like you're thrusting in all these new elements.
Right. And if they had a scene like that, it would have been with Ray Fiennes, who is the doctor character.
Could have easily been like, must be a new strand. I've been documenting this stuff. I've obviously been out here for 28 years.
Because they make it a point to say that he's been monitoring Samson, the alpha infected, for like 3 years or something like that.
And that's how he developed the darts and like being able to study, right?
Right. So they could have easily like put in that as like a touch on this greater implication of this baby being born.
Here's an easy one. Ray Fiennes has to do all that shit. Obviously, you see the guilt that he carries every time he has to axe these people. Gets a little drunk. Goes on and rant about what he's seen. And we get to see, guess what? We get some exposition and we get to see a character flaw with this dude. And the weight of what he's carrying is obviously just like Jamie, right? A lot of these guys are having poor coping mechanisms, but it's part of you being a person. And guess what? We get a little bit more of exposition. I'm cool with it. I don't know how well it fits. It might be awkward, but like, I just needed something.
I think the reason I like Ray Fiennes as a character is because Ray Fiennes' character is because there seems to be like an honesty about him that he isn't afraid to tell Spike.
Yes.
And I feel like if you include a scene in which like Spike asks him like how was this baby made?
Yes.
Then that gives the door to open Ray Fiennes to answer that as a question in like an honest and earnest way.
Yeah, I've seen Samson. It's actually funny that you mentioned that. Yeah. And I'm not trying to get like too hell bent on this thing. Like it's a very fun. I feel like newer movies are coming out where it is we are raising the landscape. We're raising the stakes. We have to make it a little bit more flashy, grandiose. It's Army of the Dead where they have to go into a casino and there's all these CGI zombies. It's like, to be an effective story, sometimes you don't need that. You can have 4 zombies running around and the tension can be there. Like we saw that in 28 days, and it can be effective without having to engage ADD audience members with all this extra crap going around, that we don't, it doesn't have to be included in the storyline. It just kind of feels like it dilutes it.
I kind of disagree, but I think there's a little bit of merit to it. me personally, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I know where you're coming from too. Like I said, this world's warped, and it is through the perspective of young Spike, right? So all this is new. So it could really be. It's almost like whatever we wanted you to create now. It is The Sims, right? Like we can. This is now the time to do it because after this one, anything out that comes up that's superfluous is going to be questioned.
Yeah.
I having had watched the other two, and it's just like. Give me a little bit of that grounded realism. And I know we're setting it up, but also as an audience member, we know the world.
So speaking of grounded realism, let's talk about the ending.
Okay.
So
great pivot.
The way this ends is that Spike brings the baby to the community, but leaves the baby there to kind of go off on his own sort of discovering himself type of journey, right? Kind of like, I'm gonna survive on my own. And he gets cornered by this group of zombies in this like valley that he's like been chased to a dead end.
Yeah.
And from the valley out comes
Boy, mate, looks like you're a little bit of a pickle.
Out comes Jack O'Connell as Sir Jimmy Crystal. What Wikipedia tells me is leader of the Jimmies.
Yes.
A character inspired by Jimmy Savile, who's like a UK celebrity who is like, after he passed away, it was like found out that he was like a sexual criminal and all this stuff. Yeah, big yikes. But
wait, he's inspired by him? We got all these prosthetic dicks in front of this kid? Yikes.
A lot of inspiration going around.
Okay.
And they come and they save the kid, but they do it in this very, like we described it earlier, Power Rangers-esque style action in dispatching these infected, and they're kind of like, "Oi, mate, bet you're glad we were here to save the day, huh?" And they've all got like different colored tracksuits,
red, blue, green, yellow.
And it turns out that the kid in the beginning that is stowed away, or like he finds shelter, and like his priest dad is eaten. And he's like,
very
"Father,
gleefully,
why have you forsaken me?" You know, pulling a Bible quote.
Yeah.
Who we thought was Jamie.
Yes.
Who's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, is actually Jimmy.
Yes, played by Jimmy.
Played by Jack O'Connell.
Yes.
And you could have given me like a year of time to figure out how this movie could have possibly ended, and I wouldn't have guessed this as like an ending.
Nope.
No one could have predicted this happening. And it leaves it off in a way where it's like, yeah, clearly like these guys are going to come back for like the next installment, right? This is going to be something they touch on. I don't hate it personally. I think it's fun. I think it's like, yeah, we're introducing like an element of silliness to this movie that I was already kind of on board of. Sort of dilutes a little bit of the weight that we get from the overall goal of this movie.
You're being very kind to this thing.
I am being kind to this movie. But then again, I don't hate it.
Yeah, you like it.
Right. Obviously, I think you take more of an issue with
this. Is us and Twister, when I'm sitting over here talking about how great Twister is, and you're just like, bah.
Fair. Yeah.
But no, you were saying about the ending, you're good with it?
No,
it dilutes it a little bit. And
I'm fine with it on the condition that it is valuable in the next installment.
Okay.
Yeah. Very conditional. Sort of like how you're feeling towards like Dune Part 2, like we're going to see how 3 sticks the landing.
Yes.
Kind of the position I'm in with it.
At least that film fit how the rest of the film went. Yeah, no, I didn't. I'm not a big. All right. I have a hard time with it because, like, I don't like. Once again, a movie doesn't resonate with you. It doesn't quite hit where you were that itch, right? You don't want to sit there and go like, "Pah, pah," like be old man about it, like yelling at a cloud. But it is fun. I mean, it's like one of those things. I feel like if you're having fun through, all right. If you're having fun throughout this movie while also getting around some of the sentiment, yes, I could see this being fun. I was having a hard time with the fun part, maybe because I'm not fun.
Right. Come on, Mac. You're plenty of fun.
Yeah, you're fun. I
was convincing as Hannah from the first movie.
Yeah, just we're in the same boat with that. It's odd. So
It is an odd ending. It's very odd. It's out of left field.
That's what I'm like. It's this. That's where it kind of everything about this has almost rubbed me just the wrong way. Not almost. Like this is a really fine film and it's well shot and I really enjoyed the acting and there's a lot of good things and takeaways from this. It's just some of the filler stuff that's going on. It just felt kind of thrust in, but it does. If you were in a world, this is Minecraft, right? Like your first Minecraft adventure. World. Oh, here he goes, old man Mac. Let's hear him talk about this shit.
I don't want to bring Minecraft into this.
But I'm saying it's a part of that first world building adventure, right? If I know about this world and I go to watch you, I go, this is boring. I've seen other people make all this other stuff. Now, had I not, and I'm watching you go from the beginning and the inception, it's like, this is very fascinating, right? It's just two different perspectives. Anyways, I'm going to watch the next film. And I hope that I hope that they take how this one ended and they have that energy throughout without construing it in a different light.
Right. I'm curious. I guess supposedly Cillian Murphy is coming back in this second movie coming out.
It has to be. I mean, if they've already made it and they said he's in it.
Reportedly. And he's an executive producer on this movie.
Nepotism. You don't even know what that word means. I'm going to throw it out there.
We love it. Was there anything else we wanted to say about 28 Years Later?
Danny Boyle hated the ending of 28 Weeks Later so much he had to add in I think there's some exposition about the virus getting quarantined back in the UK.
Because that's something that we didn't touch on in the week's discussion was the last shot of 28 Weeks Later is infected heading towards the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
And that Danny Boyle looked at and decided, no thank you, tossed it in the trash. Decided it'd be best if the UK itself was just quarantined and the whole world was going about as normal.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about, but I think it's compelling.
It's very fun. I like that element.
Yeah,
I do
like it
that.
too.
Yeah. I just wish, anyways.
Yeah,
I was going to make some inappropriate jokes, but.
Oh. Well, the film did that already with the massive zombie dong.
That thing's not a joke.
No. That's serious business.
You are making life decisions.
Shall we get into ratings?
Yeah.
I think you're going first.
Am I?
Yes.
Okay. You've heard what I have to say. 7 out of 10. Once again, there's a lot of redeemable parts to this. I just felt tonally it was off. I felt like this thing dipped into a lot of different emotional avenues that wasn't necessary. And it was somewhat distracting, but there's good sentiments around what happened. That's why I asked about Jamie's character, and that's why we talked about Ray Fiennes, and we're talking about what was the Latin phrase for "death has become us." Mm-hmm. Is that what the
memento mori?
Memento mori. I see. I thought
one must remember that you die.
One must remember that you die, which is very deep and philosophical. And Macintosh Muggleton uttered that to Harry in the 8th episode of Harry Potter. Memento mori.
It does say there's a lot of Harry Potterisms coming out of this.
Yeah, and that's also part of the UK and stuff. Like, I don't know. It's weird.
Brits are weird, man. Weird
so
people.
Weird.
We should isolate them.
Yeah.
Section them off, quarantine them.
What happens to Scotland?
Yeah, I don't bring up Scotland. Let me tell you. I'm a little bit sore about Braveheart.
Yeah, that's right. We're still, and they were bragging about it in the movie.
Right, yeah. They're like, oh, you remember when we kicked their arses in Braveheart?
Yeah, so I'm a 7 out of 10. I think this is, it could, once again, I think could have been stronger than Weeks. I think there's qualities from both that I really liked and qualities that I didn't like.
This is an 8 out of 10 for me.
Oh, thank God.
I really enjoyed this movie. I'm glad I got to see it in the theater. I thought it was like visually dynamic and stunning at a lot of different moments, particularly the penis. I enjoy the performances a lot, especially from Alfie Williams, first time film actor in this movie. I thought he did a wonderful job. Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, Ray Fiennes doing their thing, and I'm enjoying every second of it. I enjoy the silliness that comes with this movie. I enjoy the Danny Boyle having fun with this. Some of the kind of like overindulgencies of the technical qualities took me out of this at points, specifically with like that bullet time shot that was happening throughout. And there is the ending in which, like, again, I didn't hate it, but just like, all right, the last the last few earnest moments of this movie seem to have taken the wind out of its sails. So yes, that is my final thoughts on 28 years later.
Yeah.
One more bit of business, and we probably should get going here because we're 3 hours in now.
Yeah, we got this. Is
You get to make a recommendation for episode 99.
episode 99. Does it got to be a good one?
It doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be a good recommendation.
It can be whatever recommendation you want.
All right. So we were thinking there's so many movies that I've just been like, we gotta watch, we gotta check this out. And I think I'm just gonna go. We're gonna get away. We're gonna go silly with this. There's a show with Shane Gillis on Netflix called Tires.
Okay.
Have you watched Shane Gillis? No. Doesn't really strike a chord with you. So I was watching this show, and there's a gentleman in there that's acting. Like, I recognize that guy, and I look him up, and I was like, oh, he's in this. Well, there's this other movie that I heard that was it briefly mentioned, but sounds like it could be somewhat funny to talk about. And I think this could pair up well with something, just because of the nature of what it is. It's titled "Let's Start a Cult."
Okay.
2024. Let's Start a Cult. 90 minutes long.
Nice.
Yes.
I think I saw like a few snippets of this movie before. Yeah, no, I'm down. I'll put it on my watch list right now. Bada bing. There we go. All right.
Nice.
What was the other movie that we want to save it for after recording to talk about? Because you think
one.
Oh, I thought you said that you had a movie that you thought would.
No,
pair well
I'm
with
saying
this.
I think we have a couple genres that we could dive into to find a good pairing for this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for sure, Let's Start a Cult, your recommendation. Cool. Well, thank you. So if you guys don't want to be spoiled for episode 99, be sure to watch Let's Start a Cult, directed by Ben Kitnick. 90 minutes long. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Neon Crew Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and give us some 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Check out our social medias. We're on YouTube Community, Facebook, and Instagram. Been posting more on each of those avenues to let you guys know what's coming up. Keep an eye out for question threads or questions for the audience so that you guys can engage with us. Check out our Etsy page. You can find that link in the description. Shout out to Gideon for doing our music, and shout out to Lauren for doing our artwork. You can find their pages in the description below as well. McLean, how do we get away from the infected? What do we say to them to ward them off?
All right, WWTHD.
Boy, everyone, infected with what?